hatred or anything that may be against you. Oh Lord, give us the strength to take most of what we are learning here and bless our way to move forward. Please, Lord, guide us. May our thoughts, words, and actions be positive and fruitful for a better world. In your almighty name, we have prayed. Amen.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanirrahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghairil maghdubi alayhim waladhdallin. Amin. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and the sustainer of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful, the master of the day of judgment. Thee do we seek worship, and thee in aid do we seek. Show us the right way, the way of those whom thy bestow grace, those whose portions do not wave astray and go not astray. Amen.
sitting down. Okay. Congratulations, that was fantastic. You know, initially when I opened, I wanted to start with an African proverb. And the one that I found that I thought was fitting for today was that when sleeping women wake, mountains move. Yes? And as women, we need to wake to the fourth industrial revolution, right? Doesn't matter where we live, it doesn't matter our age, it doesn't matter what African country. The power with the fourth industrial revolution is in our hands, right, ladies? Are we excited? So let me introduce the first speaker today who's going to be doing the keynote address. Just a secret, he said that he has never been in a room with this many women in his life. But we're so honored to have somebody whose work I've read. It is fantastic. Professor Marwala, who's the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg. He's going to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, where it is that we sit as Africans, and what it is that we need to do to ensure that we're prepared for it. Are you ready for the talk? Please, ladies, help me welcome him. He's a little bit shy because there's so many ladies.
Sanbonan. Dumelang. Malibongwe. Thank you very much. I am really intimidated. I have never had the privilege of addressing so many leaders, women leaders. Today, this morning, I will be talking about the fourth industrial revolution, what it is, and what opportunities it is able to give to us. I'm actually a teacher, so I spend quite a great deal of time teaching, so I'm hoping that at the end of this engagement, you will be able to think about how you can be able to apply some of the ideas from the fourth industrial revolution in your work. Now, what is this thing called the fourth industrial revolution? Maybe before we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, it is actually quite important for us to understand other industrial revolutions. So the first industrial revolution actually happened in England. Now, maybe the United Kingdom. The last time I said England, a Scottish gentleman came to confront me that some of the people who were instrumental were Scottish. And now what really happened? Why did it happen in England? And for those of you who have had time in the United Kingdom, I was a student there, if you just wander towards the pub and you interact with the British, you probably will be really shocked that such an island and such a people would have come up with the first industrial revolution. The reason why it happened in England, not in China or India because of their population sizes, is because the scientific revolution actually happened in the United Kingdom. The ideas of Newton and his ability to understand how things move, the ideas of James Watt with his understanding of how heat actually works, is what gave us the first industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution gave us engines, and the first set of engines used to use coal and water. You still remember that train, for those of you who were born more than 50 years ago, you would remember there's a famous train song that actually tries to emulate that. It's a steam engine. And this first steam engine appeared in Southern Africa 60 years after it was discovered in the United Kingdom. We cannot afford to be 60 years behind. So we cannot afford to be ignorant of the developments that are happening. In fact, people think that the reason why the United Kingdom ended up colonizing the rest of the world was because of the first industrial revolution. Now, the second industrial revolution actually happened in the United States with ideas that also came from the United Kingdom. This is really the idea that if you have a magnet, you know the magnet, the thing that attracts, and you have something that conducts electricity, like a copper wire. If you move a magnet, if you move that copper wire, which is next to a magnet, electricity is generated. So if you move it, electricity is generated. And this is not because of some superstition. It's science. Now, even today, the majority of electricity that we have is generated using a magnet and moving a conductor next to a magnet. That's how ESCOM actually generates electricity. They use coal to heat water, and that steam that is coming out moves a conductor next to a magnet. And the reverse of that is if you put electricity in a conductor next to a magnet, it moves. This is what you call an electric motor. Your lawnmower is actually made out of an electric motor. Your refrigeration process is also made out of an electric motor. And this second industrial revolution gave us mass production of goods and services. The third industrial revolution is what gave us computers. It came from United States. Again, with electricity, something that conducts electricity under certain conditions. It's called semiconductor. And even up to today, in Southern Africa, in our continent, we don't have a single semiconductor company that is in operation. And a transistor, which is from the third industrial revolution, was discovered 70 years ago. So you can agree with me that we are lagging behind, and we cannot afford to be lagging behind. Now we are in what we call the fourth industrial revolution. This is an era where machines are going to do things that used to be done by human beings. Machines are going to do things that we do. During the first industrial revolution, when they were not intelligent, but they were machines. A group of people in England called who used to trace and destroy machines actually emerged. They were never able to stop the pace of technological development. So we have no choice to participate. So some of the technologies that are driving the fourth industry is actually artificial intelligence. I actually did a PhD in artificial intelligence at the University of Cambridge in England about 22 years ago. So new things, old things. So I'm going to be educating you about what it really means. So the technology in the fourth industrial revolution, there are the digital technologies like in our phones, the physical technologies like materials that are strong like graphene, 3D printing. I'm sure you saw the University of Johannesburg 3D printer outside. You should go and see how you can be able to print things in 3 dimensions. And also the biological side, the advances in biotech. Of these 3 aspects, the digital, the physical, and the biological, is basically what is called the 4th industrial revolution. Now, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is basically a procedure of making machines think like a human being. When you have a phone able to talk to, and it is able to understand you, then it's called artificial intelligence. And there are many types of artificial intelligence a little bit later. One of it is soft computing, another one is machine learning, another one is deep learning, computational intelligence. If you know more about this, there's a very good book that I have written, that I have shown there. It's a very good book. Actually, you can go and buy it on Amazon. Now, what is soft computing? Soft computing is when you don't have much data. You are building machines that are intelligent, and it does not, but you don't have much data. This is an example of the work that I did with my student about 9 years ago. It was featured on the magazine New Scientist, where we built a machine that is able to learn how to bluff. I'm not bluffing, by the way. Now, bluffing is a very, very important aspect of many industries. The whole insurance industry is actually based on the idea of detection of bluff. Somebody comes and says, and you ask them, were you drunk? This machine can be able to tell whether that person is telling the truth or not. So it can be used in aspects such as fraud detection. So this is an example of what is called soft computing. The other type of artificial intelligence is when we build machines by looking at how social organisms actually interact with one another. I am from the Limpopo province, and if you go to the Limpopo province, you will see those ant hills on the right-hand side. We call them chiulu in Limpopo. And inside that ant hill, you actually have the ants that you see sitting on my hand. Now, you might be wondering, why are you holding such ants? We actually eat them in Limpopo. They are very, very delicious. And an example of, on the right-hand side, a PhD thesis written at a university of Witwatersrand was actually analyzing the nutritious value of these ants. But the reason why I am using them is not because of their advantages as food. The reason why I am using them is because they are very intelligent as a group. These small ants are able to build such a complicated structure. If you look into that structure, the air conditioning inside is much better than the air conditioning in our buildings. So if you are going to design a building with efficient air conditioning system, looking into that ant hill is actually quite important. But the second reason is because they are very intelligent as a group. Eugene Marais, who is a South Afrikaans poet, actually was the first person to discover how intelligent these things are. And now in artificial intelligence, we take this intelligence, we put it in a computer, and we design something called ant colony optimization, which is used in our electronic maps to find shortest distances between 2 points. So that is really what an example of computational intelligence. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is what is called machine learning. What you see on that diagram, input, you can think of it as the eye. And the output, you can think of it as a decision. So you can send a picture of somebody here's face and the outcome will be who that person is. And if that is the case, we'll call it a face recognition tool. In fact, Google now, Facebook now, when you load pictures, it is able to label who the person is, isn't it? You know? That is, it is actually using what is called machine learning. So, and it is based on something called a neural network, and the neural network is actually motivated by neurons in our brains. So what we are trying to do here, we are building a computer that has all the characteristics of how our brain actually functions. Now, when a neural network is big, like the one that Facebook uses, we call it deep learning. Now, so this can be somebody's face, this can be what the person is. It can be somebody's voice, it can be how you write it. So it will be a speech translation system. Not too long ago, we wrote a neural network which took a voice in Sepedi, and then it translated into English. Now we obviously see in Google Translate that this is actually quite possible. But much of the technologies are still based on writing. You write something in English and you translate it into another language. Now, you can also do it in speaking. You say something in another language and you translate it into another language. And because the network that we have is big, we actually call this a deep neural network. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about that, there is a book that me and my student from Cameroon wrote that you can get on Facebook. Now, this is an example of a robot that is driving a car. Can you see, this is something that human beings can be able to do. You see, when I go to my village, my village chief is a woman. And when I arrive at a place, I have to kneel down. So if I take this robot, it will be respectful to my chief. It will be very well behaved, and my chief will be quite happy. It can be able to open doors. All things that are actually done by a human being. It can be able to do engineering work. Not too long ago, we had firefighters who died in Johannesburg. You saw that? You could send something like this to do jobs like that are dangerous for human beings to be able to do. So this is really the world in which we are living in. Now, how does it learn? It learns using that thing that I call neural network that I showed you. How does it sense? It also uses neural network. It can react, it can drive, it can walk, it can even kneel. It is almost human. Because it is almost human, we say it is artificially intelligent. But there are certain things that it will not be able to do. Do you think it can be able to fall in love? Is it conscious? Consciousness is a difficult concept. It's not conscious. Can it be recruited by COSATU to join the trade union? You can make this machine work for 24 hours. Of course, this has all sorts of implications on how we organize the workforce now. Given the fact that all these automated machines are actually with us. Before I came back to academia, my job was to brew beer. I used to work for a company called South African Breweries. This is a long time ago, over 20 years ago. And what happened, South African Breweries has a huge brewery in Ebai, Port Elizabeth. It used to employ about 3,500 people. They automated this brewery about 20 years ago, not even using advanced things like artificial intelligence. And it can now be operated by 50 people. I'm sure for those of you who come from Eastern Cape, you probably will realize that you know fewer people who work for South African breweries than you knew 20 years ago or 25 years ago. This is really the world in which you are living in. Now, how is this artificial intelligence actually changing the world of work? Now, I'm going to go into banking. Now, what happens when you go to apply for a loan in a bank? They do something called credit scoring. They will ask you, how much do you earn? Are you married? Give us they will look into your behavior from your financial statements. How many assets do you have? What are your expenditure? And based on all those factors, they give you something called a credit score. That credit score is used to determine whether you will get the loan or not and what interest rate you are going to get. All that is now changing. Now, with the advances of artificial intelligence, it no longer just relies on information that you give. It goes to the internet to look for information about you. And it is fed into your credit scoring. The second changes that are happening is that you don't even need a human being to do that task. A computer can be able to get that information and be able to give the outcome of the credit application. Again, these are jobs that used to be done by a human being. They are now being done by a machine. So the whole field of economics is actually changing. Me and a friend of mine went to Amazon to buy a book. He was in Brazil, I was in South Africa. We got 2 different prices. Why? Because the machine now is looking at a personalized demand curve, and based on that, it does individualized pricing. So the whole field of economics, the practice of it, the thinking of it, is actually changing right in front of our eyes. So this is an example of something called information asymmetry. They say markets are not rational, and they are not rational because we don't quite know what is happening. So to explain information asymmetry, they use what is called a car salesman. You have 2 car salesmen, one sells good cars, another one sells bad cars. And you as a buyer do not know which one is which. The conclusion is that a good car salesman will go out of business. They are less likely to discount than a bad car salesman. That is information asymmetry. And artificial intelligence is actually changing that. It's actually reducing the levels of information asymmetry in the markets for the better. So this is another work that we did quite a number of years ago. About 20 years ago, I wanted to buy a house. So I went to Standard Bank. And then they did the credit scoring. And then they said, you qualify for the loan. But what will happen if you die? Who is going to pay this loan? They say, you need to have a life insurance to cover this thing. I fill the form. When I get a call, they say, Dr. Marwala, can you go and take an HIV test? You still remember when you apply for life insurances, they asked you to take HIV tests? And the reason for that was because they did not have a mechanism of pricing that risk. So I was actually quite worried about this. So we went to the Department of Health to actually get data that we can be able to use to build an artificial intelligence model that will be able to make such decisions without necessarily asking people to go and take HIV tests. Of course, the data that was given to us was the antenatal data, because that is probably the richest data that we have, which is the data that is collected from women when they go to antenatal clinics. And then we're able to build these machines, and we're able to create a system which you can be able to price the risk of a loan without necessarily having to ask them to go and take an HIV test. Again, there is a book that we wrote on this, but we also have a patent. A patent is basically an IP, something that we need to do more as South Africans. When you have an idea, you should actually protect that idea, because ideas can be stolen. The first country to actually do online payment without credit card was actually Kenya, M-Pesa. Now you have many versions of M-Pesa, and the originators of the idea are not even getting any royalties. So it is very, very important that we protect our IP. So this is another work that I did with a professor, collaborator from Italy. So the question that we were asking was, can we be able to predict whether two countries will go to war? Would you be able to predict whether two countries can go to war or not? Do you think Swaziland and Switzerland will ever go to war? So you can be able to predict, you know. But obviously you have countries that is easier to predict, small countries that are far apart. So we're building a system that will be able to look at any given country and be able to tell whether they are likely to go to war with any of the countries in the world. That's really what we're trying to do. And the way we were going to do it, we're going to do it using artificial intelligence, because that is what our expertise is. It actually turns out that you are able to predict whether two countries are going to go to war with an accuracy of more than 95%. That is better than what a human being can be able to do. So this is an example of a book that we wrote on how to do that. And the Chinese defense actually translated it into Mandarin. So I was actually quite looking forward to seeing how are they going to spell my last name in Chinese. The first character there is a horse. Ma in Chinese is a horse. The second character is the gutter of a roof, is wa. And the third and the fourth characters is to pull, is la, mawala. So I am a puller of horses from the gutter of roofs. Now, this is another work that I did with my student, Nadim Muhammad. So what happens is that when people are sick and they go to hospital, when they have epilepsy, for those of you with family members with epilepsy, you will know this. So what the doctors do, they put a device in the patient's head. And from what they put in the person's head, this is what appears on the computer screen. And they normally print this. You know, it's basically a piece of paper with these things going up and down. And they look at these things and they decide whether the person is experiencing epilepsy or not. Now, an experiment was done where about 100 doctors were given 100 of these pictures, and they were asked to decide whether each one of them has epilepsy or not. And then the information was stored, and then after 2 weeks, they called the same doctors and gave them the same information. Half of them changed their minds. Now, if a doctor changes their minds, it's called misdiagnosis. It means somebody who was sick was not given medication. It means somebody who was not sick was given medication. So what we did was to create an artificial neural network. This is how it works. It takes that signal, it goes into a computer, and it is able to tell you whether the person is experiencing epilepsy or not. It turns out that this thing can be able to do this better than the best doctor around. In fact, the whole field of radiology, which is based on doctors reading images, medical images, is one of the disciplines that are under threat of being replaced by machines. This is another work that we did quite a number of years ago. This is when you have somebody with throat cancer and they have to have their voice boxes surgically removed. So they can no longer speak, you know, but their tongue still moves. So what we were trying to create here is that if we put this device here inside their mouth, and you can see how it will look like when it is inside their mouth, and then this can be translated into a signal, and the signal goes to a neural network that I talked about, and it is able to recreate the voice of the person who has actually lost the voice. Again, this is an example, and this work, as you can see, we applied for an American patent, so it has been patented, and this was an article written at MIT Technology Review on this invention. Again, they use what the fourth industrial revolution is doing to the health domain. It's another example of a disease called, I did this with my student Simon. We call this pulmonary embolism. Very dangerous. It kills many, many people. So what we are doing here, we are looking at we are making a computer look at the picture, and it makes a diagnosis whether the patient has pulmonary embolism or not. Again, it performed much, much better, over 90% accuracy, much better than a human expert. And this is another work that we have done in the fourth industrial revolution. This is the thing called a triage. A triage was actually discovered in the army. What happens is when you are fighting very, very far from home and you have one doctor and you have maybe 10 injured soldiers, the doctor cannot be able to help all of them. So they have to schedule who am I going to help first, second, third, fourth, and who am I not going to help because I would not have time. That whole process is called triage. But the whole process of triage is what is actually needed in hospitals. You know, when you go to casualties, you know, you need to know who is supposed to be helped first, second, third, and fourth. So what we were doing here, we're designing a piece of software that will be able to take all the information and will be able to tell who are you going to, who should you help first, second, third, in order to save the most number of people. Again, it's an example of what we can be able to do with the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. This is the work that I did, mainly for my PhD. I did this work for my PhD, and the rest of the work was done by one of my master's students, Dr. Busisiwe Vilakazi, who ended up going to get a PhD at Oxford in this area. So the first person who taught me engineering was actually my grandmother. My grandmother was actually my first engineering teacher. So what she would do, what my grandmother used to do, she used to make clay pots. Still remember clay pots? So she will go to, I will accompany her. I'm the oldest in my family, so I was very close to my grandmother. So I will accompany her to collect clay. Clay is found next to the river. Yeah. And then she will select which clay to get. When I went to engineering, they call that material selection. They even have sophisticated software to be able to do that. My grandmother did not have sophisticated software to do that, but she did it very, very well. And then she will bring the clay back to our home. Then she will form it into a pot. After it is formed, she will not take it to the fire to heat it because it's going to crack, isn't it? You know? So she will take it to the sun so that it can dry first. And after it is dried, she won't go and cook with it. She will go and bake it in the oven. You know, and she will bake it. It will be so hot. And then she will allow it to cool slowly. She won't try to put cold water so that it can, because it will crack again, you know. And that whole process of cooling the pot slowly, in physics we call it simulated, we call it annealing. And the first person to come up with the mathematical process of what is happening is a German person called Boltzmann. He even came with some complicated equation called the Boltzmann equation. My grandmother did not know who Boltzmann was. She did not even know the Boltzmann equation, but she knew what Boltzmann equation was all about. In fact, based on my observation, it is quite conceivable that Boltzmann might probably have gotten the ideas of his equation from us. So after it has cooled down, she will go and knock each pot and listen to it. The algorithm was very simple. If it rings for a long time, it's a good port. If it rings for a short time, it's a bad port. That is really what it was all about. Now, what has happened is that as she was growing older, I realized that she was disposing good ports because her hearing was deteriorating. So that is what gave me the idea as to how do we automate this whole process. So the way we do it, you go to a structure. This is an example of a bridge in Sandton that collapsed few years ago and killed 2 people. So you put measuring devices. They measure the movement of the bridge. They hear the noise. That information goes to a computer, and the computer decides whether that bridge is a good bridge or not. Exactly as my grandmother was doing with her ports. We call this conditioning monitoring. So much of our cars are monitored by systems like this. And I think what we can learn from this is that knowledge, we shouldn't think that knowledge only appears in books. Our culture is rich in knowledge that are actually quite essential for the 4th Industrial Revolution. It's another example of what you can be able to do with these technologies. This is now what the dentists do. This is what you can do with the car. This is what you can do with the bones. Again, much of this we have written. I've written 15 books. So you can be able to get much more information on this. It's another example. When I was growing up, the first job I wanted to do was to be a monitor of dams. In my village, there is a dam called Komkeik. Komkeik in Afrikaans means come and see. It was a spectacular dam. In my village, you can actually see it. It's still there, you know. And there used to be this man with a uniform. He will come with a book, and he will go inside, look at few things, and he will write things down. So, of course, that is quite laborious. And what is happening here is that we are using a camera to look into a dam. And based on what it sees in the dam, it is able to tell how full the dam is. So you can even have an app that actually monitors all our dams. Maybe our Minister of Water Affairs can be able to find this useful, especially with regards to the issues in the Cape. Again, this is an example of what can be done using this technology. Now, it's not everything that this technology does that is good. There are other things that it does that is not good. I went to Singapore with Peter Vale and Bongani Mulunga. And then when you arrive at the airport, and when you're coming out, you have your passport, you put it on a machine, and there is a camera looking at you. So at the back, you have an artificial intelligence machine that is able to tell whether the person on the picture of a passport is the person that I am seeing on the camera. So it's quite impressive device. And Peter Vale came, and then he did that. It allowed him. I appeared. He did not allow me. And Bongani appeared. He did not allow him. It turns out that these face recognition tools are actually discriminating against Africans. Now, why are these machines discriminating against Africans? It is because they are trained using data. And most of the machines that are trained using data that largely come from Europe and Asia, not from Africa. And there are business opportunities for you. How do you create databases that are able to understand African faces? It's the same thing with Google Maps. Have you seen how have you heard how it pronounces our street names? It does not know how to pronounce our street names. Why can't it pronounce our street names the way they are supposed to be pronounced? Again, it's because it was trained by data that has been gathered in North America, Europe, and Asia. Again, there is a business opportunity for us to create our own maps that are able to pronounce things the way they are supposed to be pronounced. So, and the other thing that we have been working on was how do we build a speech recognition tool. I told you about the speech recognition tool I built to translate from Sepedi to English. I did it with Mashaba, who was my student. So we were very excited about that, and we wanted to extend that to Xhosa. Can you be able to build a machine that can be able to do the same? I can tell you, Xhosa is a very complicated language. The machines could not be able to do it. What does it mean? It means we have to create algorithms that are able to understand our languages. And the reason why it couldn't quite understand Xhosa is because from a linguistic perspective, Xhosa is two languages. It comes from Bantu languages, which come from the north, and it also comes from Khoisan. So the cliques are from Khoisan, and the non-cliques are from Bantu. So you basically have two distinct languages that are being spoken at the same time. And algorithms are not used to that. They are used to only one language being spoken. Now, what are the consequences of the fourth industrial revolution for us? What do we need to do? I think we need to worry about what is going to happen to the world of work. How are the future of jobs going to be? And what do we need to do about it? There is a theory that has been developed that says that jobs that we have been, tasks that we have learned over a longer time are much more difficult to automate than tasks that we have learned over a shorter time. For example, it is much easier to train a computer to read what has been written down than to build a machine that can be able to climb a tree. That will be much more difficult. So we just need to reflect on what is going to happen to jobs. And what is the fourth industrial revolution is also making human beings irrelevant in the workplace. So for a very long time, trade unions were developed to deal with the issue of exploitation of the workers. The fourth industrial revolution is going to ask us to do something about human irrelevance. What do we need to do for human beings so that they are at the center of life? There is studies that have been done that says that the fourth industrial revolution is going to come up with huge inequalities in society. Those with money to buy those robots will buy those robots, and they will make money for them. I wonder who is going to buy their products if people are not with jobs. Again, it's something that we need to reflect on. And by the way, some people will say, but it is not happening here. It is happening in Japan. What is happening is that if you are making nuts and bolts in Benoni and you don't automate, you won't be in business because the Chinese products are going to be cheaper and you are going to be out of business. The issue of freedom is also a big deal. We had in the United States that the whole election was determined by somebody who had access to Facebook data through a company called Cambridge Analytica. What are we going to do about it? Our freedoms are being taken away. Any one of you who is on Facebook now or Twitter, Facebook knows where you are now. And that is not a joke. It is true. There is an article that was written by somebody in New York Times, and this is true. And he says that a friend of his called him and said, "Are you in Chicago?" He says, "Are you here?" He says, "No, I am at Uber." And the Uber leader actually took him to a room called God's Window, which is a window where you can be able to see all the Uber cars in the world, where they are and who is inside them. So our freedoms are being taken away. So we need to craft laws that will protect privacy without necessarily stifling innovation. And as we move forward, we also need to think about how are we going to interact with robots. Already we are interacting with machines. If I were to ask each one of you to leave your phones at home when you come here, it will be a disaster, isn't it? You probably think you cannot live without these gadgets, isn't it? But you lived without these gadgets for a very, very long time. And your lives were just as good, you know? So we need to understand the impact of these technologies on human beings and what we need to do about it. Now, in conclusion, I think we need to produce different types of skills. For example, the reason why Google Map does not pronounce our streets well is simply because the guy who basically created that device is a computer scientist who never learned anything about languages. When we teach people now, if somebody is doing engineering, they should do courses in human and social sciences. And those who are doing human and social sciences must also do courses in technology, because you can't be able to operate today without technological basis. And this is what we call multidisciplinary studies. I was an undergraduate student in North America, and I transferred from University of Cape Town. So when I arrived there, which was probably about 29 years ago, 28 years ago, they told me that even though you are doing engineering, you should take 12 human and social science courses. I was not a happy guy. I said, but I'm here to study engineering. And then I went and took a course called History of South Africa in Cleveland, Ohio. History of South Africa in Cleveland, Ohio. I had to wait for 2 years because I couldn't fit in. It was oversubscribed. And then they taught us, they prescribed 2 books, one written by Martin Legasic, History of South Africa, which talks about all the frontier wars, the Anglo-Boer War, the Anglo-Zulu War, but you get information on the surface. And they said you also must do a body of work that is much more deeper, and then they prescribed a book called The Dead Shall Arise. How many of you have read the book called The Dead Shall Arise? The story of Nongawuse. And I was reflecting on this. Do our mechanical engineering students have the opportunity to learn history of Southern Africa? No, they don't. So we have to change our curricula so that our people can be able to understand what is around them. Because the businesses of the future will depend on how much we respond to our surroundings. How much we tackle the problems that are around us is what is going to define businesses of the future. Because it is quite evident that the people in California, when they make Google Maps, they are not thinking about us. They are not thinking about our accents. So we have to create those industries ourselves. Of course, we can be able to achieve this if we are open-minded and we believe that education is important and multidisciplinary education is important. Ngiyabonga, thank you very much.
That was excellent. I think that was the 4th Industrial Revolution 101. Now we all understand what it means. To be really honest, there are times when I've been confused about what it really means, what doesn't it mean, and I think, Professor, you broke that down perfectly. And just in summary to a lot of what he was saying, specifically at the end with regards to just, making technology and so forth that is around our own culture, it would be great if out of this room, a woman would come up with something that would change the world and tell the African story in a beautiful way using AI, right? So hopefully somebody's going to think of that. You can patent it. You can pay me later. All right. So right now we have something that we want to kind of show you a little bit. If we can get the drone going, Chris, is it ready? Okay. So who's ever heard of a drone? You've heard of a drone? Now, it's often used when it comes to filming and videos and so forth, right? So I think we're going to start to get the drone going. So as it goes over your head, you can kind of wave at it and everything just to make sure you're on there. Chris, whenever Okay, he's going to set it up. Now, so some of the other awesome things that droning is able to do. So in Côte d'Ivoire, for example, droning is used in different farms and everything to be able to see what is going on with the crops and with regards to harvesting, which is quite good so that you know what's going to be going on with your crops where that's concerned. Am I correct? And then also, I found it so fascinating when I was in Kumasi in Ghana, people use droning, as a way to deliver medication to outskirts and areas where they cannot get medication. So that's also another excellent way that droning is used on in a very practical level. And then we've also seen when there are areas of conflict and they need to get food to different people, they're now able to use droning to get the food over there. So that's a really great innovation that has been used quite a lot and is being used extensively around the continent at the moment. So Chris is going to start flying this drone, and then he's going to answer a few questions about some of the other exciting things that droning can do. Don't get scared, it's not going to go low. Just, okay. There we go. Hello. I love the way everybody looks from over here. So Chris, we can circulate it around the entire room. So we make sure that everybody's face is captured in this moment. What's often used in droning, say hello.
Wave, guys.
Now, whoever would have thought a few years ago that there would be a machine that is really small that would fly over and could capture what your face looks like from so high, right? Now, Chris, if you can talk to us about just some of is Chris mic'd up? Yes.
Yes,
Chris, if you can talk to us about just with regards to agriculture, how droning is used in an effective way.
Well, basically in the agriculture industry, you can actually use these things for livestock monitoring. You can also tell the health of the animals via thermal cameras, so you can check the heat signatures and compare them to different animals. They can be used for all sorts of things, stockpile counting, and the main thing right now that they're being used for is to replace helicopters, because helicopters cost around 15,000 Rand an hour to operate over a farm. And this drone, as you can see it right now, is around 6,000 Rand to purchase
wow,
it.
that's half the price,
That's
which is
half
quite
the
incredible.
price.
That's incredible. Now, in terms of surveying land for developments, how is droning used?
So basically, they can map out areas for surveys, and they can actually properly plan where they're going to put the maize and things and maximize the crop yields.
And then we spoke a little bit about delivering health and medication to people in outskirt areas who would need that. How can you give us some more tangible examples?
Well, basically, these things are designed, you can pick up around 8 to 12 kilos depending on the size of the drone. So, and in inhospitable areas, you can actually take these things up to 7 kilometers away and deliver relief aid.
Which is really incredible. And finally, of course, what everybody's been part of in this session, obviously, is just being able to be captured on video, because I'm sure that there are a lot of movies that are shot simply with droning.
Yes. Sorry?
I said with regards to video and capturing, talk to us a bit about how droning is used.
Well, basically, they're used in the movie industry quite a lot. I mean, I work for National Geographic as a second job, and yeah, we use them for all sorts of filming, wildlife and documentaries and everything.
That's awesome. Can we give Chris a round of applause? Let's say bye to the drone. Bye. Bye. We should give it a name, right? Bye, drone. Hashtag African Woman in Dialogue. That's our drone. We'll take ownership of it. Now, we're ready to start off this panel conversation. And obviously, we're looking, today is all about how it is that women can be included in the fourth industrial revolution. As the professor did rightfully outline, is that with regards to the first, second, and third industrial revolution, a lot of people, specifically within Africa, have been left behind. But we need to make sure that with the fourth industrial revolution, that us as Africans and us as women are definitely included. I know that when he was speaking, there was a lot of things that were going through my mind. So we're going to, in this panel, talk about how it is that we make sure that we don't get left behind, how it is that we secure jobs, you know, because this obviously means there's a lot of retraining, not just for the educational system, but for people who are also out of the educational system. How do we ensure that we are included? Because I'm sure job security is something we're all thinking about. And then also just how it is that we can use it in different areas. So I'll give an example. In Ethiopia, there is a lady who has started an exchange program, and quite literally what they do is, obviously when you go into the farm areas and so forth, and somebody wants to sell, say if you have crop and that sort of thing, and you want to sell it, and there's a middleman who comes. So the middleman can tell you, I'll use South African rands for example, they'll tell you that no, you know, for the avocado it's going to cost you, the avocado is only worth say 2 rand, you know. And then what they've done is that they've developed this technology where literally you can send an SMS and they'll tell you what the real value of the avocado is, which means that as woman, number one, you're more empowered, correct? Number two, you're cutting out the middleman. Herd goats and so forth. And what happens is before is that they would go to them and say, oh no ma'am, your goat is only worth 500 rupees. Guess what happened? That's all changed around totally, and the women in India are a lot more empowered because now they literally send a message again using similar technology, and what they do is that once that message is sent, they found out that their goats are actually worth 2,200 rupees, which is incredible, right? Yes, it is. And this is the sort of technology we need to be seeing being used a lot more in Africa. But let me not speak anymore. I'd like to invite our distinguished panelists onto the stage. First of all, if we could please have, they can all just come. I'll just call you one after the other. Our first panelist is Brian Armstrong, who's a professor in the chair of digital business at Wits Business School. Another gentleman brave enough to be here, Brian, we salute you. And then Ms. Lillian Barnard, who's the Director of Public Service at Microsoft South Africa.
Emma.
Okay, we'll just, if all the panelists could be set on stage, and then we'll go into the individual presentations. My mistake for not articulating that correctly. So Ms. Lillian Barnard, if you could also please make your way onto stage. And then Ms. Regina Howden, who's the Provincial Manager for Small Business and Professional Bank at Nedbank South Africa. A round of applause for her. Professor Fiona Trechana, who's DST NRF South African Research Chair in Industrial Development at the University of Johannesburg. And finally, we have somebody who forms part of the millennials, Ms. Ramogele, who's the founder and CEO of Nonnovation Africa Foundation. If you could all please come on stage. Okay, they're being mic'd up. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm so sorry about that, ladies. Do you forgive me? Yes, okay. So what we're going to do is, Mr. Armstrong, if you could start with your presentation. He's going to talk a little bit about, you know, how it is that we can bridge the gap with regards to the fourth industrial revolution and the economy in general. As we already know, there are a lot of disparities between different people, and so he's going to talk about how it is that women can be included a lot more and how we can bridge the gap. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Brian Armstrong.
Thanks very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So Professor Marwala gave us a really good overview of the fourth industrial revolution. What I want to talk a little bit about is how to make sure that everybody, and in the context of today, specifically women, participate in the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution and aren't marginalized. So it's about driving inclusivity. Before I get into that, let me just recap. There's a few different ways of looking at this thing we call the fourth industrial revolution and different terms for it. And I don't want us to get hung up on terminology. So Professor Marwala shared with us that the fourth industrial revolution is effectively the culmination of a process of the first industrial revolution, which was about mechanization and water power and steam power. And then the second industrial revolution brought us mass production and the assembly line and electricity, and I would add the internal combustion engine. The third industrial revolution was about computers and automation. And the fourth industrial revolution is about cyber-physical systems, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on. The Japanese, however, and the fourth industrial revolution, by the way, is largely, it started in Germany and Switzerland, the thinking about it. The Europeans are very keen on it. Africans generally are quite keen on it. But the Japanese, for example, have a different model. They call it Society 5.0, which really comes after Society 1, which was the hunting society. Society 2 is the agricultural society. 3, the industrial society. 4, the information society. And now, Society 5.0, the cyber-physical society, which they describe as an era of drastic change. The Americans tend to be more caught on a terminology of digitalization. They say this whole thing is about the world going digital. And when we talk about digitalization, we tend to think of it in 3 ways. There is a technology revolution. If it was not for artificial intelligence and robotics and connectivity and computing, there would be no revolution. But it is as much about the way the world that we live in and our society is transforming. It's about that we all want to be connected. We're all social and active citizens. And in fact, I would say things like Twitter and Facebook are more a manifestation of the society we live in than they are about the tech. The tech's fine, but it's more about society. And then the third component is changing ways of doing business and changing ways of doing government. And there's new business models like platform business models and crowdsourcing and agile and so on. But again, if you think about Uber or Airbnb, it's more about the business model than it is about the tech. So digitalization is where these 3 come together. But what all of this is it talks to the fact, whether you call it fourth industrial revolution or society 5.0 or digitalization, it all comes down to the fact that we live in a time of profound technological disruption, which is affecting all of society, all of business, and every facet of life. And although it's a technological disruption, it is because of the tech that it happens. But the impacts go far, far wider than the tech. Now, when we talk about, I want to bring this closer to the topic of today, which is about empowering women to participate in the fourth industrial revolution. Let me show you a quick video.
Emma. Huh? Emma. 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 Emma.
I love it.
So, it's a funny video, but it actually speaks to a narrative which says something along the lines of men are progressive with technology and women are not keen to embrace technology and are stuck in old ways of doing things. I mean, it's a very funny advert and we all laugh, but it does inadvertently and unconsciously reinforce a narrative which says women are technophobic. And the problem is, from a statistical point of view, the challenge I'd like to first pose to us is that technology adoption and usage by women is lower than it is by men. There was a study done across 12 Latin American and 13 African countries from 2008 to 2011, which shows that cell phone adoption, internet usage is lower amongst women than it is amongst men. And the question is, why is this? And it speaks to the narrative that says, on the one hand, some people say, oh, it's just because women are technophobic. But there's other factors. Because it is an established fact that gender disparities exist between men and women in income, employment, and in education. Now, perhaps this could explain the unequal technology adoption. And what is interesting is if we control out those effects, if we say let's normalize it to take out the effects of income, employment, and education, then what's actually interesting is it turns out that women are at least as comfortable with technology as men. So firstly, let's dispel this myth that women are technophobic and slow adopters. There are other factors, specifically income, employment, and education disparities, that are the main cause of slower adoption of new technology by women than by men. So, this brings us to challenge number 2. If there are already income, employment, and educational disparities, I'm going to make the case that technological disruption amplifies inequality, employment, and skills challenges. So how do we avoid a downward spiral? So, let's consider the positive outcome. We know that digital access and empowerment lead to positive outcomes in education, income, and employment. And what I've just said is that positive outcomes in education, income, and employment drive greater access to digital technologies and usage. That's the virtuous cycle we have to create. The challenge is, on the other hand, it could be argued that a lack of digital access and digital disempowerment will create more unequal education, income, and employment and lead to a downward spiral with reduced access and reduced usage. Let me now move to the point about these 3 issues in the digital economy, and I'm going to go really fast because I want to get the panel going. Let's talk about income and concentration. Let me ask you a question. Who remembers back in the 90s when the internet first came onto the scene? And we all said, the internet's the most powerful democratizing platform ever invented because it makes information available to everyone. And information is knowledge, and knowledge equals power, and power equals wealth. Right? Wrong. What's actually happened is that we've seen a concentration of wealth in the hands of increasingly few people. We see that one company, Apple, has a market capitalization, or Amazon, by the way, is the same now, has a market capitalization equal to the entire Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We see that the top 3 tech companies have a market cap bigger than the GDP of Africa. So what we're seeing is that in the digital economy, wealth is increasingly being concentrated in the hands of the digitally empowered at the expense of the digitally disempowered. What you see here is market shares in traditional industries, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but you'll see the market share is reasonably well shared out. In the digital economy, if you look at just the one on the right, Google, one company, has 92% of global market share in search. Incredibly concentrated. Now, the problem with concentration is its flip side is inequality. So let's look at South African data. I'm sorry I don't have data at an African level on this, so let's look at the South African data. South Africa, 1/4 of us, and that will include many of us in the room, earn 3/4 of the gross household income. We are educated, we live in nice houses, we drive nice cars, we shop at Woolworths, and we're digitally empowered. Then there's the other 3/4 of South Africans who earn about 1/4 of the gross household income. They certainly don't shop at Woolworths. They are less educated. They are not digitally empowered. And between us lies the economic and the digital divide. And because the digital economy is driving concentration, the concern is that this digital divide is getting wider and deeper, not shallower and narrower. Okay, so that's the concern around income inequality and concentration. Let's talk about jobs. Now, I'm going to go through this really quickly, but the future of jobs looks something like this. For the next 10 years or so, people who are involved in creative roles, leadership positions, personal brands, complex algorithmic design, systems thinking, we will sit comfortably at the top of the future of work. But people who are doing routine computation, fact-based analysis, white-collar clerical work, that's going to be automated. There are three things computers struggle with at the moment: roles that are high in creative intelligence, roles that are high in emotional or relational intelligence, and roles that are high in unstructured dexterity. Those will continue to be done by people. But routine physical work and production will be automated, which means that the people that are doing that now will be reduced to lower paid services work, no work at all, or sub-economic labor. Now the question we have to make is, how do we make sure that the majority of us are nearer the top of that pyramid than the bottom? Because the data suggests, this is a survey of all the studies that have been done on this, is that between 10 and 50% of jobs globally are exposed to technological disruption. And in South Africa, Stats SA says our employment looks like this. So we have about 1.5 million managers, 1 million professionals, 1.5 million technicians. But then you look at clerks, almost 2 million clerks, 2.5 million sales and service roles, and so on, 3.5 million elementary workers. And if you look at the scenarios for disruption in South Africa, we see that somewhere between 2 to 5 million jobs are at risk of being disrupted in the medium to long term, depending on the scenario you look at. So again, the question, let's say, is women are already disadvantaged in the workplace. How do we make sure that with this pressure on employment, it doesn't get worse? Third issue, and I'm going to show you one slide on this, because I think it highlights it. The World Economic Forum presented their 2018 Future of Employment report. And they say, don't worry too much, because a lot of roles will be stable. Technology will create some other roles, although it makes some roles redundant. And the net effect is that there will be more roles created than roles that are made redundant. But there's a problem. Let's look at the roles that will be made redundant. So firstly, some of the so-called prestige jobs: accounting, auditors, general managers, financial analysts, lawyers. These jobs are at risk according to the World Economic Forum. But the bigger problem is this. Look at the jobs that will be created: scientist, specialist, manager, specialist, specialist, professional, specialist, analyst, specialist, professional, etc., etc. And now look at the jobs that will become redundant: clerks, clerks, secretaries, workers, workers, clerks, 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 repairers, installers, clerks, etc., etc. And the problem we have is to make sure that we establish skills and give women access to skills that allow them to find roles in that middle column: professional, scientists, specialists, managers, rather than in the right-hand column: clerks and workers, because those are the roles that are going to be challenged. Let me finish off with one slide that I want to ask you a question. This is actually quite an interesting slide. At a women's conference, who are these people and what do they have in common? Well,
Wow.
the first thing they have in common is they're all men. And there are no Africans amongst them. And this is the problem, because these are the leaders of the global tech giants. Now, this is the challenge that we have to do, is how do we, if I asked you a slide with the top 10 women in politics, or the top 10 women in showbiz, or the top 10 people in sport, there'd always be a polite representation of women. But when it comes to the tech sector, you see it for yourself. This is the challenge we have to address. But I will say one thing about these 10 men. They saw a future which was different to today. They had the vision and the tenacity and the skills and the leadership skills to make it a reality. And I think that's what we all need to take on board from this picture. So that's enough by way of setup. I think hopefully I have posed some questions which the panel will now hopefully be able to deliberate. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. That was eye-opening. I think there were moments where we were all a little bit nervous, but I think it is good in this sort of setup to have this open and honest conversation. Personally, for me, whenever we hear about technology and all the things it can do, you're sold this idea that everybody's going to be okay. We're all going to, the world is changing for better, but what you've put out there is that if we're not prepared and if women are not included, we're going to consistently be left behind. So thank you very much just for putting the facts out there for us. A round of applause to Mr. Armstrong, please. Now, this panel conversation is about driving inclusivity and empowering women to participate in the fourth industrial revolution. And as I was thinking about that, is that the simple fact is, as much as we talk about it, how on a simple and cultural, nuanced way do we do that, especially in an African context? So I'm going to allow all of my panelists to just give, their opening remarks and talk briefly in their introduction about how it is that they're preparing themselves, or they are prepared for the fourth industrial revolution. So we'll start with Ms. Lillian Barnard, who's the Director of Public Service at Microsoft SA.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you for having me. So I was just listening to the two presentations, and if you just look at the data points, it's quite staggering. Mm-hmm. So it seems like a huge challenge, but I always say that we need to look at the opportunity that the fourth industrial revolution is actually bringing for us. So there's something that we won't be able to change, and that is that the world is profoundly becoming more digital. It is changing the way that we live, the way that we play, the way that we work, and it's upon us. And I think the biggest question that we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to make sure that we participate? How are we going to make sure that we are relevant as women? And as Microsoft, we have a lot of offerings, but what I always try to do is to task myself to come and talk to, women, to talk about, the opportunity in front of them. Because if you look at everybody today, actually all of us are challenged to learn. Mm. I've been in IT for the last 23 years, but trust me, every day I have to upskill myself to make sure that I'm relevant for these future jobs when we're talking about being future ready. And when we talk about fourth industrial revolution skills, it means that everybody have to upskill themselves. And at Microsoft, we have an offering, and we call it Microsoft Cloud Society, because we believe that as a tech giant, as a global tech company, we have to democratize knowledge. We have to democratize technology. And what we've basically done is that we have made that platform for free, and I will unpack it a little bit as we go into the panel. And what I'm literally asking women to do is to open themselves up to some of these new tools that are available for free, and start exposing yourself to the technology, because all of us are forced to learn, and we need to be brave enough to make sure that we step up our own individual game.
Thank you very much. And now also I'd like to introduce Ms. Ramachlale, who is the founder and CEO of Nunovation Africa Foundation. Talk to us a bit briefly about what it is that you do and how you're prepared for the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay, good morning, ladies. It's still morning, Can I just ask everyone to stand up, including our panel? Can I just for 2 seconds, can I just ask everyone to stand up? I want you to say these 3 words with conviction. I innovate.
I innovate.
I create.
I create.
I disrupt.
I disrupt.
I innovate.
I innovate.
I create.
I create.
I disrupt.
I disrupt.
Say it together. 1, 2, 3.
I innovate, I create, I disrupt.
That's it.
Wow. Powerful. All right. And then our next panelist is Ms. Regina Gouden, who's the Provincial Manager for Small Business and Professional Bank at Nedbank South Africa.
Hi, good morning.
Is her mic?
Can you hear me?
Can we hear her now?
Okay.
No? Okay, let me go to Professor Fiona Trejana from DST, NRF South African Research Chair in Industrial Development at the University of Johannesburg. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks very much for the invitation to be here. I'm really honored and delighted and so excited to be part of this inspirational gathering of women from around the continent. The fourth industrial revolution is going to affect all of us, whether we like it or not, and whether or not we choose to be directly involved. We might think it's something just for IT people, for engineers, for famous professors like Professor Marwala, but it's something that's going to touch all of our lives, and not only technologically, but also socially, culturally, politically, economically, and in myriad ways. I'm going to focus in my remarks today on just one of the ways in which the fourth industrial revolution is likely to affect us, which is the employment aspect, and to make a few comments about that. I think it's one of the key issues in the discussion of the fourth industrial revolution, both in the literature and in public and policy discourse, and more so in a country such as South Africa, with our extremely high rates of unemployment, as well as in other countries around the continent. Obviously, for us to have any further rise in unemployment would be a really fundamental concern. At this stage, it's too early to say what the effects of the fourth industrial revolution are likely to be on jobs. But there is a growing body of research and evidence that we can look to learn from and to formulate policies taking that into account. On the one hand, some people argue that the fourth industrial revolution is likely to bring mass destruction of jobs, logical unemployment, and a kind of dystopian future. On the other extreme, some people argue that there'll be no net displacement of jobs, that any jobs destroyed will be balanced by new jobs being created. We don't really know yet, but the reality is likely to be somewhere in between these. The overwhelming body of evidence suggests that there will be net destruction of jobs on a major scale associated with the fourth industrial revolution. There will also be job creation, but probably less than the jobs which are being displaced. And this will differ between countries and for different types of workers within countries. It will certainly affect different kinds of tasks, different kinds of jobs, and different kinds of workers differently. What the evidence is suggesting is that the workers who will be least negatively affected, or perhaps even positively affected, are those workers who are involved in high-level creative tasks, tasks that are not routine and repetitive, but that are constantly changing and need human thought to interact with other people, where that human interaction is intrinsic to the job, and creativity and problem-solving is intrinsic to the job and can't, at least at this stage, be displaced by machines. Another kind of job, even in terms of blue-collar jobs, that's likely to be less affected are even manual jobs, but which require a high degree of dexterity and different tasks which are changing constantly that machines, as yet, can't displace people from. So unlike earlier waves of technological advancement, in this case, it's not only blue-collar jobs that are likely to be most affected. Some blue-collar jobs will be affected, but some white-collar jobs will also be highly affected.
Professor,
one interesting question.
I think we're going to have to maybe check her mic. I think the mic might not be... Can you hear her clearly? I think you're a little bit soft. I'm so sorry, because there were a lot of things that you were saying that were important, so I just would please like if the sound could maybe just test your mic to ensure.
Shall I continue in the meantime? Or
We can't hear you. That's the problem. Yeah, we're losing you in and out. Can you hear her? Okay, continue. Sorry, on this side we couldn't hear. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll try and speak a bit more loudly while they try and adjust the volume, perhaps. I was just saying one interesting question is whether women or men are more likely to be affected by job displacement. And so far, there's no clear-cut answer. Brian reflected a bit on some of the evidence which is emerging. Some of the occupations which are likely to be particularly strongly affected are those in which women are particularly concentrated. Clerks, legal clerks and other clerks, bookkeepers, other activities like that. But some of the most affected jobs are also those in which men are more concentrated, such as some forms of manual work. So at the moment, I think the jury is still out there as to what the gender balance of the jobs most affected will be. There's also a lot of debate out there as to whether developing countries, such as our own, will be more or less affected than the advanced economies. On the one hand, we're obviously further away from the technological frontier, and not so well placed to take advantage of some of the technological opportunities. We may also lose out from the reshoring of jobs from developing countries to developed economies, which would previously have been lower cost to undertake in developing countries due to lower wages, but with automation, some of these jobs are moving back to advanced economies. On the other hand, when we look within our economies, with a relatively lower cost of labor than in advanced economies, there's also less incentive to automate. So this may, to some extent, buffer our jobs. But we're affected both directly through automation in our own economy and indirectly through automation in the rest of the world. So even if we changed nothing within our own factories and in our own offices, we would still be affected by losing out on global markets if we don't keep up with this kind of a technology. Lastly, let me just comment very briefly on policy aspects. I think there's different ways of approaching our response to the fourth industrial revolution and the likely job losses that will occur. To put it broadly, one wide option is to say, let's accept that there will be just displacement of jobs and look at how do we generate other incomes for people so that even where people don't get income from work, they are still able to have a decent and even rising standard of living by sharing socially in the benefits of automation. And perhaps people can have more leisure time and more time for more creative and meaningful activities, even though they're not working. Another broad policy option is to say, let's minimize the job losses and try and hold on to jobs as much as we can. Of course, these are two broad alternatives. There's other options in between or combining these. And perhaps in the discussion, we can get into more detail on some of the concrete policy responses which are out there. What is clear, though, is that the less proactive a country is, or a company, or an individual, the more likely they are to lose out on some of the risks of the fourth industrial revolution, and the less likely they are to gain from the opportunities which are out there. So the clearest lesson which countries and individuals and companies can learn is to say, move forward. Don't wait to be affected and then react. Move forward proactively. So as I said at the beginning, the fourth industrial revolution is going to affect all of us, whether or not we want to be engaged, whether or not we want to be involved, we are going to be affected. So let's us rather choose to be involved in the debates, in technology development and deployment, as individuals, as communities, as organizations and institutions, and as countries, so that we can get the best out of the fourth industrial revolution.
You have a bit of a demo for us?
Yes, I do. I'm hoping you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wow, it's awesome to be in your space, and really thank you for this opportunity. But before I start, I've got a video that I'd like to share with you, and then I'm going to introduce you to a new colleague of mine, and then I'm going to just chat with you for about 5 or 10 minutes. Be good. Can we get the video, please? I'd like some sound.
We may have to start the video again. I think it's definitely frozen. Perhaps you can introduce us to your friend first. I'm excited to meet your friend.
Yes. So we were talking about robotics. We were talking about the fourth industrial revolution. What you just saw on stage was Pepper, my female colleague at Nedbank, that is a robotic. But this is her brother that we're going to introduce you today. You're going to come on stage. This is Pippi. And Pippi is just going to show you really what robotics can and cannot do from a financial sector. But just let's talk to Pippi this morning. Okay, I don't know if you all can see Pippi, and I hope you can. And I'm just going to get my colleague Duart to ask Pippi a few questions, and perhaps then...
Yeah, sure. Just hold it for me like this quickly. I just want to move this a little bit forward. Put him down there. Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm quite nervous with all the faces that I'm looking at, so hopefully my robot's also not that nervous. I just want to explain a few things to you guys, and I need you to be as quiet as possible. She is quite sensitive, or he's quite sensitive to sound, so he might not respond to me because of the echo that's in this room from the speakers. You also might not respond. So Peppy is one of our robots that Nedbank has. You know, so we've got a robotics program where we run physical robots. We run physical robots and we run automated robots. Our software robotics is all about automation and making the bank more efficient. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask Peppy, and let's see if he can answer it. What is your name?
You can call me now.
How old are you?
I'll be 11 this year. How time flies.
Are you a boy or a girl?
Since I'm a robot, I don't really have a gender.
Aww.
Can you stretch your arms?
All right.
Yay.
Hands up.
Aww.
Are you cool? Are you cool?
No.
Are you cool?
Cooler than a polar bear toenail.
Can I trust you?
I am your friend. You can tell me anything you want.
Are you human?
Of course not, but that shouldn't keep us from chatting.
Are you alive?
Not the same way as you are, but yes I am.
Do you eat?
Sure, I prefer my electro-streamed shake skin, not stirred.
Are you a robot? Are you a robot?
Clearly not.
She needs to look at me. Peppy?
Peppy is overwhelmed.
Will robots replace humans?
I'm here to serve humans. If there are no humans, there is no me.
Who made you? Who made you?
I'll repeat. I'm here to serve humans. If there are no humans, there is no me.
Can we be friends? Can we be friends?
This is my best day ever. We are now friends.
Aww.
Thank you. Thank you, Duarte. The point is, we've been talking about robotics, we've been talking about robots, and that is what you see. A mechanism by far different to most others. So I want to be a little disruptive today, because we've talked about jobs and jobs losses, we've talked about what's relevant and what can be irrelevant. Now, I am hugely amazed by over 1,000 women from all over Africa who are mothers, probably sisters, you are siblings, whatever it is. I want to say to you, why do we need jobs when we can create employers? When each one of us can run a business that can actually sustain us and our families. You know, we're so used to wanting to educate to become doctors and lawyers, which we've just seen can become irrelevant, as opposed to upskilling ourselves in this fourth industrial revolution to become highly effective entrepreneurs. So that's what I'm saying. Each one of us has that ability. So I always start one thing by saying, you know, Martin Luther King had a dream. Now, his dream would have just stayed a dream if that was not executed well. So in order for that dream to become a reality, there had to be a level of execution that took place. So I'm saying to all women out here, you have huge, big dreams. Not just dreams for yourself, but dreams for our future generation. That is talking about our children going forward. I would say, stop saying to our children, do not be a part of this conversation, or do not answer, or do not think, or be quiet. In fact, exactly to what you were saying, innovate, be creative, think aloud, be active in the way you do things, because there is nothing better than taking our children of today and using their creativity to become most efficient in the next fourth, well, we are already in the fourth industrial revolution, taking us into the fifth. And into the fifth industrial revolution, I see, from a financial point of view, because I'm with the Nedbank, and I see things being done a whole host differently. Obviously, in the way we think, in the way we innovate, and in the way we do things going forward. Every business that maybe you are a part of, or you want to start, or you're thinking that you may want to start, needs to become digitized in one way or another. Whether we're using Microsoft, or whether we're using academics, or you use a book. Either way, my point is we need to make sure that we upskill ourselves. I just want to talk around becoming more business-minded rather than becoming more employee-minded. You know, if you are in a job, that's great. If you can keep it, that's fantastic. But if you can create jobs, you would be far more effective than anybody else in Africa. Now, you can imagine, women of Africa, you have a company, and you employ one or you employ two people in your business. What would you do for the economy of Africa? It would just boom. Fourth industrial revolution or not. Do you agree or not? Do you think you can be a part of that? And in your thinking, you know, the fear factor of robotics taking over, they can do nothing without humans. They need you and me. And without you and me, there can be no robotics. So the point I'm saying to you is, what are you doing in the way you are thinking, in the way you are developing your own skills, as well as our future generation? So let's talk about that question. For me, that is very, very important.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Pippa. Pippi. Oh, yes. I think I want to take her home with me. Say, go make me coffee.
It's a pity you can't see his sister Pippa. The video would have been great.
So now let's start this panel conversation. I think Ms. Howden, you mentioned a lot about you know, not looking at ourselves as employees versus being employers, which is very powerful when we talk about entrepreneurship and how that's going to change a lot of things. But, you know, touching on what Mr. Armstrong had said earlier about the disparity with regards to education and access, and the reality is that currently not enough people are upskilled, as you had mentioned, with regards to the fourth industrial revolution and the skills that they need, even to create employment within the tech sector. Mr. Armstrong, can you give us some ways in terms of education for both people, like in formal education, and then if you're finished studying and you know you're past your age of studying, how it is that you can educate yourself? And Ms. Barnard, you can also step in on this answer.
So if I could start, I think the first step is awareness and engagement, because this is not going to go away. It is real, it's here to stay, and it's going to affect everybody. So I think things like today, awareness of what it is that it's happening, but then to engage it rather than to sort of push it aside and ignore it. I think then when it comes to skills, education and so on, I mean, let's separate out formal skills development from informal skills development. I think there's probably the informal ones I would suggest are at least as important. And there's two I'd like to highlight there. If you're aware of something and engaged, you need to become comfortable in that space. And it doesn't necessarily come naturally to all of us to become comfortable with the new technologies and the new ways of doing things. And it's not just cell phones and computers, it's the applications we run on them, becoming familiar and comfortable in e-commerce and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a digital literacy and engagement dimension. The second is when we speak about this, the thing most people would say, the most critical skill is to learn how to learn. Now, the challenge with that is it means different things to different people.
Correct.
My definition, the most important thing about learning how to learn is a willingness to learn new things and recognize that what made you successful yesterday is not necessarily what will make you successful tomorrow. So it is a culture and a personal orientation towards lifelong learning and reskilling. We could talk for hours on the formal skills and so on, and whether we should teach kids to code and how universities need to change their curricula like we are doing, and maths and science, STEM skills in basic. Those are all absolute. But there's lots of forums for talking about those. What I'd like to emphasize today is the personal engagement, personal renewal, and personal getting comfortable and familiar personally in this tech space.
I like that, learning how to learn and being willing to do that, which is really powerful, because sometimes it is just about that self-empowerment and wanting to be involved and engaged in what it is that's going on around the world. Ms. Barnard, would you like to add to?
Sure. So I actually would like to look at it 3 ways. So if you look at digital literacy, we would say today that it's still basic, because that is just basically teaching you how to use technology, and then of course you will get to some of the more advanced emerging technologies that we talked about, such as machine learning and artificial intelligence. So let me just talk about what we're doing around digital literacy. Even though we see that as base and we're talking about advanced technologies, the realities is such, and we're doing a lot in that space with young people, that a Microsoft digital literacy skill is still number one. It's one of the number one skills for you to obtain any formal employment, at least in this country. That is what research has shown. And what we are doing today is that we are partnering with various NGOs, and in particular we've partnered with the Gauteng provincial government, and they have made available a digital literacy learner management system that gives you access. And this access is available in public libraries in our townships. And literally our young people, and literally anyone can go in, and it will make this technology accessible to you, where you can literally go and learn at your own pace. And that's quite important, because I always say to people that when I started out in the IT industry 20 plus years ago, the first thing that they did was they put me in front of a computer. Today, it's not any different. Whatever you do today, you're going to be put in front of a computer, and the assumption would be that you would not know just how to switch it on, but you would need to be proficient at least in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and that is but just the base of you to understand. And then we progress into some of these more advanced technologies, such as artificial learning, and we're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're talking about app development. So we have made a different platform available, and that is literally a platform that is available across the whole Middle East and Africa, and I mentioned it and I said it's cloud society. So if you want to be at the bleeding edge of technology, if you want to truly get your hands on future-orientated technologies, this is a platform for you to go. And I would really urge you to log on, because I'm saying to women, there's no need for us to get left behind. All of us are now learning at the same time. We're literally starting right now as men and women exactly at the same page. And it's all about the appetite that we have to learn, and to learn very fast. And just to give some examples in terms of what it would allow you to do. Say, for example, if you have a business today, one of the biggest things that businesses do worry about is, how do I scale? It is no longer good enough for you to have a business where only the people in your township knows about what you have to offer. How do you make sure that your offering goes viral? How do you make your market accessible? Technology is therefore an enabler. So you need to understand how technology could help you build a business that could scale. There's no longer a need for you to have bricks and mortar. If you think about traditionally how businesses were built, you can literally put up a site where you can interact with your customers, and technology is able actually to give you that platform. So as an IT company, what we're doing today is that we are accelerating and helping people upskill themselves, because we understand that we have a role to play. We have a big vision across Middle East Africa to train at least 100,000 people in some of these new emerging technologies. And just to quickly talk about what are we doing in terms of the generation to come. We talk a lot in Microsoft about the class of 2030. The class of 2030 are literally those learners who will start in grade 1 today. The question is, what are we doing today differently in education to make sure that they are ready for the jobs of tomorrow. We need to teach them differently. We need to make sure that they are able to fill these jobs. So it's not just about jobs going away, but the reality is that we are creating new jobs. So we need to make sure that we give them future-ready skills in order for them to participate. Microsoft actually recently commissioned a study to say, with all of these new things happening, what's happening to jobs? And it came out of the study that in the next 5 years, 112,000 new jobs will be created on this continent, not elsewhere. But here's the challenge. We're going to have to make sure that we have skills in this country readily available to take advantage of those jobs.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm going to ask a question. I'll leave this open to the panel. I hope you don't get upset with me, but I want to ask something that I feel is a very real question. So we're sitting in Johannesburg. We're in an air-conditioned building. We have access to things. We can pick up our phones. My iPhone, I'm so sorry, Brian. I've sold out to them, is in my pocket. I can literally type in Google. I can do what I want. If I wanted, I could start something in terms of an app and that sort of thing. But then in South Africa and in the greater Africa as a whole, the further out you go from the main city, the less this happens. And that perhaps is the bigger question, because while we're here talking about women inclusion, we need to talk about women who live outside of the more urban cities where there's access to programs and what it is that you're saying. Yeah. So how do we target those women? Because those are, first of all, they're majority of the people within the continent. Second of all, they're the ones who kind of are the backbone, to the continent as a whole. So how do we tap into that? Because that's an African problem and we need an African solution. If anybody can jump in there.
Let me take a shot at it. I think one of the things that we've been told growing up was, if you want a rumor to start, just tell 6 people, and they will tell the 6, and the 6 will tell the 6. Now we've got 1,000 women in this room who are being given a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of statistics on what's going on in terms of skills development, in terms of technology, in terms of digital literacy, and where it is and where it can go. And now, I mean, part of why I didn't have an opening anything except innovate, create, and disrupt, because a time has ended where we need to just keep feeding information and we sit on it in our nice notebooks and do absolutely nothing with it. It is time that we all take the responsibility in this room to ensure that the people who don't know about the information that we keep gathering in our nice books is accessed and it's being used. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to hold private sector accountable to ensuring that this information reaches the deepest, most rural areas in Africa, because those are their clients. Good. 2 is to hold government accountable for the same issue, but also it sits in our hands, as Nelson Mandela said. It is important for each individual that hears even the smallest information about what's going on to say, let me gather my 6 and tell them what's going on, and also create opportunities to ensure that they grasp the information and they use it to empower themselves and to accelerate those ideas that are in the most rural areas to be the most commercial and will lead them directly to your Microsofts and your NetBanks.
I like that. Very nice. Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to it, Professor?
Yeah. Well, here we are talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution, AI, and so on. But most people in this country and this continent don't have computers, meaning that they haven't passed through the 3rd Industrial Revolution.
Exactly.
Many people don't have electricity, meaning they haven't passed through even the 2nd Industrial Revolution. In some cases, even the 1st Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
So it's not as though we've passed through all of these 3 and we're now going into the 4th. It doesn't even work in a linear way like that. But the further behind people are, the further behind they'll be left.
Yes.
So the closing of this digital divide and the economic divide, as Brian pointed out, is fundamental. Because we can't just look at this as a narrow technological issue. If people are poor, don't have jobs, if incomes are unequally distributed, it's not a technological solution. It's an economic and political solution that's needed.
And it's got a lot to do with policy as well.
Yes.
So just maybe picking up on the private sectors, the policy in South Africa is that all corporates have to have enterprise development, yeah, and they have social projects as well. So what I normally find, and I'll just perhaps speak from my point of view, what we've done in the last 2 years has taken this kind of conversation out into the townships. We've gone throughout South Africa and we've done this training in an incubation kind of way to all township owners of businesses. So we've upskilled them in their level to where they are, to where we need to take them into a next level. I just think if every private sector who have got this means took it upon themselves to ensure that they've educated one more, or gone further one more, or created through Microsoft, I don't know how they do that in the technology way, or through education, that they find a way to reach those rural places that it is so needed, and every one of us play a role, then we would reach one more that we've never done before.
Good, thank you. Thank you. So the challenge for us from a technology point of view, if you just think about in terms of how we typically layer technology, everything starts with connectivity. And yes. The biggest challenge that we have in rural South Africa, rural Africa, is that, connectivity becomes the first piece before you can get any piece of advanced technology to ride on it. So in Microsoft, what we've done is that, and of course we need to partner as industry to make sure that we get to some of the most remote places to ensure that we address the digital divide in Africa. So we have a piece of technology called TV White Space, and it literally gives us airbands where we can get some of our technology to ride on it. And we're rolling it out. It's not fast enough, right? And this is about industry coming together to really make sure that we put connectivity in the right places. I in particular want to draw your attention to something that happened a couple of weeks ago, which was the teacher in Ghana. I don't know how many of you actually read about the teacher in Ghana who was drawing Microsoft Word on his whiteboard because his urge of wanting to teach his students about, what does, Word look like, what does Excel look like, and he literally drew pictures of it on his whiteboard. And of course, Microsoft got to hear about it, and they donated computers, software, and everything. Their school is fully kit out today. And what we also need in these pockets, in our various communities is catalysts for change, because we need people to partner with us in communities to actually bring to us and make a business case. And I mean, industry is reaching out. All of us have philanthropy projects. We're doing a lot of work with NGOs. We're partnering with government. There's not enough partnerships. And the point is that we need to accelerate these initiatives. We need to make sure it lands. And even if it lands in a township, we need people literally to queue out there to stand in line for the education. So we also need to make sure that we drive the right level of awareness and hunger amongst our next generation to actually take advantage of what's being offered.
Thank you very much. Mr. Armstrong, would you like to add or?
Well, maybe in the sense that I'm standing in for Sipho Maseko, the CEO of Telkom, let me say something with regard to the connectivity. There's, it's often said that one of the big problems is the cost of access, the cost of data. Now, I've analyzed data prices quite extensively, and the problem isn't the average for the average person. If you or I, we live in Sandton and we buy 200 gigs a month, we can get data for less than 1 cent per meg. That's good by anybody's standards. The problem is the people in rural areas and the people who are not affluent, who buy 10 megabyte packages or 50 megabyte prepaid. There they will be paying 100 times per megabyte, while we who can afford it pay 100 times less.
Absolutely.
That can't be right. So the issue for me isn't that the average price of data is too high. The issue is that it's got to be rebalanced, that we can make the entry-level packages more affordable.
That's very powerful. It actually reminds me of a quote that I heard. I'm trying to remember whose tweet it was. It was a thought leader. And they literally, I'll paraphrase, and the quote was around, if African leaders are so interested in entrepreneurs in Africa, then we need to relook at how it is that data is priced. It was something along those lines, which I think is powerful. Now, let's get on to policy. Professor, you had mentioned about how this was a huge issue, and having the right policy in place so that as we step further and further and deeper into the fourth industrial revolution, that because we're sitting in Africa and we don't want to lose that human touch. We want to be able to grow and go ahead and move forward with the world, but we also want to be able to keep that human aspect. So what sort of policies or that sort of thing do you think can be put in place to ensure that that the process does not leave anybody out?
Well, I think the starting point is that nobody can afford to stand still. Whether for us as an individual, we might be doing well in our job, but is that job even going to be there in the future? At a company level, at a country level, no matter how well someone is doing or an institution is doing, they can't afford to stand still. So change and not only keeping up is the key. In terms of some more kind of concrete policy ideas, let me just throw out some kind of suggestions. The one is a greater emphasis on skills development. In South Africa and the continent at large, it's something it's talked about a lot, and a lot of money in many cases is put towards it. But the outcomes don't necessarily reflect that. And in terms of the skills development for the fourth industrial revolution, this has to encompass both really technical skills training, science, maths, engineering, and so on, which is going to become increasingly important, but also creativity, problem solving, the human dimension, which machines can't replace and which can actually become more important in future. So that kind of holistic skills training is really important. At a more industrial and economic level, I think we need greater government support directed towards industrial development and technological upgrading of both production systems and also of services. So we need actually an industrial policy for the services sector, which is competitiveness, so that we can compete internationally as well as domestically. Greater funding of R&D, research and development, targeted research and development, which is in the right fields. And lastly, I would just mention that inevitably there will be losers from the fourth industrial revolution. And we also need policy to support people, regions, industries that will be losing out. So for example, there's different ideas out there. Basic income to support people who lose their jobs through the fourth industrial revolution through no fault of their own. Or alternatives, but there has to be some sort of net so that even people who lose out are not plunged into poverty.
Thank you very much. I was watching a talk from one of the panelists sitting on the stage with us right now, and I hope I got the numbers right. So apparently the stats go as follows. For every one job created, that's a job that leans more towards men. For every one through the fourth industrial revolution, for jobs what men would normally do, 3 jobs will be lost. For every one job that is created with the fourth industrial revolution that leans more to women, 5 jobs will be lost for women. Why is that the case, Mr. Armstrong?
I think, look, I'm not sure of those stats, but I think one can say it's the nature of the jobs that have been created are typically those that are higher in the STEM fields, that are more the professional analysts, which historically, for probably all the wrong reasons, have been skewed towards men than towards women. And the jobs that will be lost are those that are in sort of elementary roles, clerical roles, and so on. So that's my assumption. But if I may, can I come back to the policy?
Yes, you may.
Some policy things. I'd like to suggest 3 additional areas. The first is that a higher degree of economic integration in Africa be beneficial, and more so in the digital economy than it already is outside of the digital economy. The reason China can create an Alibaba or a Tencent is the market scale, the market effects that the scale brings. And we don't have that. The issues of inter-country trade in South Africa are inhibitors for to creation of our own digital champions, for e-commerce and things like that, so a higher level of economic integration. The second critical area, in my opinion, is to rethink competition law a bit. Competition law is currently essentially a national thing. If one company is bigger in South Africa or has market power in South Africa and it can be anti-competitive, then we take it on. We don't think globally, where we have these global tech giants which are not necessarily in themselves in South Africa anti-competitive or have market dominance, but at a global level they have market dominance, and we have no way of addressing that. The European Union does it because they've all got together, but as Africa, South Africa fights our case, and Kenya fights their case, Nigeria fights their case, And there's a case to be said for rethinking competition. And the third thing, and some of my fellow panelists might cringe, is the issue of taxation.
Yes.
At the moment, globally, taxation is based on point of production rather than point of consumption. So if you buy a cloud service from Ireland, the revenue and the tax benefit accrues to Ireland. We need to, and this is, there are serious economists talking about a rethink of the global tax regime, that we can actually make sure that we get the benefit of these digital services that are provided where they are consumed rather than from where they are provided.
Ms. Barnard would like to comment.
Yeah. So just on more the policy piece, and maybe perhaps also share with you Microsoft's whole take on especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, and we talk about ethical AI. And if you, and Professor Mawala actually talked about it quite eloquently, talking about some of the routine jobs, the mundane jobs will be done by robots, and it's true. And we believe, and as we are infusing, you know, intelligence literally in everything that we do, so the question is, what will the roles of human then be? So there's a study that talks about the role of the workplace will become more and more human, because there's certain things that machines won't be able to do. It's about creativity, communication, critical decision making. That still will lie with humans. Collaboration. I don't know how you would collaborate. So for me, we should not despair. I think as we have to hold ourselves highly accountable. When we talk about, in Microsoft, we have an ethical AI guide. So whenever we think about developing anything, it has to go through certain steps to make sure it's ethical. But for us, we see artificial intelligence as an opportunity to augment and amplify human ingenuity and not replace humans. It should ultimately become an enabler of humans and not replacing humans.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful.
Just
if anybody wanted to add in just about ethical AI,
I think just on the policy issue, I think the first thing we need to understand is that there's got to be a level of change management. You know, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we do things. And more often than not, you find that people, as we sit here right now, and speak about the fourth, or even going to the fifth, or talking about whichever revolution, there's a level of fear that comes in it. The fear, first of all, within myself that, you know what, I may lose my job, or I am not good enough to go and do what needs to be done. And I just believe that if we get that behavior change, that shift, and if we can talk to 1,000 women today, just shift, have that ultimate shift in your mind that you are good enough to do anything that can happen. You can train a robot to do what you want. You can remote control a drone to do the things that you need to do. You can educate yourself through technology. And I just believe that that change factor, both behaviorally and technically, needs to happen almost immediately. And that's very important.
Yeah, so just to add on that, one of the things that we noticed, especially at the G20 summits we attend globally, is that at all the conversations that have to do with digitization, the women will always opt for the social part of the conversations, and it will just be the men sitting in the room where we're talking about digitization. So there's also a mental and cultural shift that we need to make, where in December, we'll be buying granddaughters and daughters dolls and hairbrushes and hair dryers, and the boys will be getting their PlayStations, they'll be getting their cars. Toys are no longer, you know, things are, she said, has leveled the playing field for all of us to ensure that the young not technology. They're not said that if they drop their DSTV remote, mom is gonna kill me. I just need to put it together. I need to YouTube and see how do I repair this thing before.
Thank you so much. You can clap if you want. Now, just, you know, when we speak about, because Ms. Barnard, you mentioned ethical AI, which I think is something that is so critical, you know, we deal with it, just as in every other sector, you know, ethics is else in the panel have around ethical AI and functions in an ethical way that protects the people of the continent and more specifically women.
Okay. So yesterday we were in a meeting for the Masisulu Women of Fortitude, and the stories that went around the table were around what women are doing socially to impact their communities positively. And them are in the legal and justice system, and they're very clear that the reason rape cases and women abuse cases usually fall out of the docket is because the system was designed for men, by men. And so it is important that in AI, we take the stand to participate in the development of the policy and of how artificial intelligence should be managed, so that we ensure that it's built to suit everyone, not just men and not just women, not just black, not just white. It should be a socially cohesive solution, and it cannot happen if we're gonna sit and just watch the men develop this AI. So it is important that we all participate. Even at 60, you should be able to say, what is this artificial intelligence and how do I participate in it? Are they imbizos? Because in South Africa, there are a lot of imbizos about land, about, you know, where's the imbizo for artificial intelligence? If Microsoft and Google are here, who are they talking to about these new products that they're going to bring to the country? So it's all about participation.
Very nice. Any other comments from the panel? No? Okay, Professor in his opening keynote address he painted a really beautiful image around how he learned engineering from his grandmother, you know, and he gave the whole story about the clay, which I thought was so articulate, just thinking about that. And I think if you're somebody who studied history, you would have heard about how in Timbuktu and everything, you know, a lot of sciences and everything came from African countries as a whole. So I guess I said all of that to say this, because we already know that within Africa we're so rich in terms of culture and ideas, and we already have solutions back home, you know. There are ways that my grandmother fixes things, and I'm like, how did you even think of that, you know? How do we bring our culture into, into the fourth industrial revolution, and how do we spot opportunities? Perhaps the question should be, especially if we're looking at entrepreneurs, especially if we're thinking of people who live outside of urbanized areas. How do we do that, you know, so that we're in control of our culture, and if I can use the word, our African narrative from the fourth industrial revolution perspective, if anybody could jump in there.
I think part of that is how we look at innovation. Innovation is fundamental to the fourth industrial revolution. But often when we think about innovation, we think about something happening in a lab somewhere. But innovation is happening every day across the country in different ways. Product innovation, where people are coming up with different products, and process innovation, where people are coming up with different or better or cheaper or more appropriate ways of making something that was already being made. The problem is that where some of this innovation is happening in an informal context, it's not being upscaled, it's not being commercialized, it's not being shared. So even where there's ideas out there, they're not feeding into wider development. So it's about supporting that innovation which is happening, broadening the base of innovation, and where there are ideas, translating those into development which goes beyond that specific niche or that specific area where the innovation is actually happening.
I mean, I think the point was really made that, you know, we need to focus on doing what computers can't. Yes. Let's not try to do better than computers what they are always going to do better than us. And that means we need to focus on our humanity, on our humanness. That is what makes us special and what computers will never copy. And that relates into roles about, so, you know, what jobs we can do and so on. But coming back to your then point about the African cultures and so on, in a way I think Africa starts from a better position in that our cultures tend to be more social, more collective. I mean, the whole principle, as I understand it, of Ubuntu is that we exist to extent only in relation to other people. And it is celebrating that person-to-person connection, which I'm sure will elevate some of our businesses and make them more competitive than those that are strictly technological and try and actually just do what the computers can do. We mustn't ignore that. We need to engage and we need to win. But I think we've got something that we need to treasure as well.
So I just want to touch from an entrepreneurial point of view. You know, I listened to what the professor said. He learned engineering from his mom. You know, I speak to entrepreneurs and I speak to the room, Every entrepreneur learned how to budget at a very early age. You know, our forefathers had a little black book. Money coming in and money going out. It's really simple. And they were able to turn their businesses from what it was to an expansion just using a little black book. But these days, we can digitize that. You know, and if you look at whether you're in a rural area or whether you're in an urban area, if you could take your business, which is practical, physical, and you could convert that story into numerics, in whichever way you want to do it, digitize it, black book, write little notes, Excel, and then look at how then you can expand your business with a little bit of upskilling. You know, and I believe that, you know, the way we do things then is so different to the way we do things now. Only now we're doing it in a lot more efficiently. But you need to be upskilled to do that. And I'm just saying, give everyone that opportunity to be upskilled.
Definitely. A few, and then we're going to take some questions from the floor, please.
Just, I think, 2 points from me. If I think about the fourth industrial revolution, I think it's giving us, as a continent, the greatest opportunity than ever. If we just think about the ubiquitousness of mobile computing, just think what that has done for communication in this continent. You meet someone from Uganda, and we just met this morning, and the question would not be, how do I get hold of you? We know exactly what to do. We can communicate with each other even after this forum and continue that relationship, and that is the power of technology. And I think that as a continent, we have an opportunity to exploit the promise of technology right now to make sure that we actually move forward. At Microsoft, we have what we call a digital transformation framework, and what that basically says is that, you know, we are developing a digital economy. Everything is going to digitize, and literally, you know, customers are looking at the digitalization of all services. So if you're an entrepreneur today, just think about every business. Every business wants to make sure you empower your employees. If I just think about the tools that we have, I no longer have to be at the office. I can literally, after this meeting, do all my work without physically stepping back into the office. Engaging your customers. You want to make sure that you engage customers. Every business today wants to provide better services to customers. We can just look at the banking example, and that has happened because very few of us nowadays walk physically into a bank. And the optimization of operations. Every business are looking for efficiencies, to drive better efficiencies, wanting to cut down costs, and there's always a better way of doing anything, whether you're doing predictive maintenance, etc. So when you start looking for opportunities, look for opportunities almost using these lenses. And there's always a way for you to transform any, you know, part of a service. And if you just look at, for example, clinics, and you look at queues, there's always something you can do around queues to make sure you cut that down. And you need to almost pivot yourself to the pain points in a country and in an economy. If we look at healthcare, if we look at education, there are clear pain points for all of us to do something quite innovative. And I always say that if we want to be relevant, we have to make sure that we play where it matters. So if you just overlay that strategic, you know, framework over entrepreneurship, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us out there to make a difference. Instead of just looking at the jobs, let's look at the business opportunities that are actually opening up in the continent.
Absolutely.
Would you like to make a comment?
Just a quick one. I think it's important that we all understand that Africa on its own, we are our own economy. If there's a billion of us and we look at China and there's a billion of them, when you get to China, you will not use Google, you will not use Facebook, Twitter, any of that. You use their Bing, which is their own search engine. Use things that were authentically designed for Chinese people in China. Well, there are ways around it, VPNs and all, but I'm just saying they've embraced themselves as an economy, and we can do the same as Africans. Then I think we'll be able to then keep the authenticity of the African culture in the innovations that we come up with.
Definitely. Do we have any questions from the floor? Okay, so the way we'll do it is you'll just queue behind one of the mics and be sure to speak clearly in, and then you'll wait for me to point towards you. I see people have notebooks. I hope you guys people have been scribbling notes. So we'll start with the lady in the yellow in front. If you could just say your name, and yes, you can bring the mic down. Say your name and then ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Ntabi Monsu, and I'm from here in South Africa. And thank you, Professor Fiona, for talking about a holistic approach. So what we have done is we've created a life skill. So I'm worried rather about the young people more especially at primary school level and at high school level, because that is where this information needs to go to. Absolutely. And those are spaces that are neglected. So what we ended up doing as a solution, as my company, Soul Inspiration SA, we actually developed a life skills project. It's a diary that speaks to life skills, that speaks to entrepreneurial development, that speaks to technology, that speaks to financial education. And I'm just making a plea rather than asking a question to the panelists that are sitting here to support this initiative, to go into the African continent, because it is a solution which is a holistic approach that is going to help our children from that level who are going to be the future leaders of this African continent. Thank you.
Good day to everyone. My name is Thando Kumete, and I am a tech entrepreneur, and I founded Mteto, which uses gamification and artificial intelligence to teach social fabric values and law, as well as protective behavior to kids in basic education. More than that, we use AI and big data to monitor learning imperatives to make sure they understand the content. And finally, Mteto also uses a GPS system to link these kids with helpers, legal and non-legal services who can help them in the case that they've been raped or they've witnessed a rape, etc., etc. So what I want to say is that we are here, we are building, and we are doing things, but we don't have the support. You have requirements like having to generate 500,000 Rand annual revenue in order for you to get support, which is totally ridiculous. And then you've got commercialization barriers to entry so that you can actually take your idea to market. There are all sorts of barriers. You cannot get to the relevant people to take your idea to market. So what I'm saying is, how can we go about removing those barriers? Because we are here and we are building, we are young, we are ready, but we need the red tape to be removed.
Congratulations firstly on what you're doing. And what she's saying is very true, you know, and also it also touches on patenting, because if you're somebody who does not have the access to protect your idea as well, when you take it to people and you're shopping around for ideas or for funding, how do you get about that? So let's, if you want to, if anybody wants to respond to that, just getting past the red tape and not having to find the huge amounts of money that perhaps a lot of people don't have to be able to ensure that their ideas are put out there.
We're not a bank.
Yeah, we're not a bank.
So maybe let me just kind of try and answer that, right?
Yes.
So I recently actually launched a program, and I called the program Black-Owned Partner Program for Microsoft. And one of the conversations that I've had with the partners was that I want to make sure that when you come through the program, you're actually ready to participate in our business and to work together with Microsoft to actually help us deliver a service. And for me, I always say that we should make an opportunity to listen to see where can we play a role. And as Microsoft, we're a software company, technology company, and literally anything can run on our platforms. But I also urge business owners to say, understand, the business of certain companies and understand how you can put yourself in the center of what's important to them to make sure you build relevance in order for you to go to market together with them. And that is my advice.
Okay.
So if I have to perhaps add a little bit of that, there's a whole host of innovation and there's a whole host of ideas that sit out there. There's a target market that everyone endures to, if I may say that. And obviously, there are certain sectors of the market that will be attracted to that particular innovation that comes in. What I find that when we go out into the townships, we see brilliant, brilliant ideas. What we don't see is that, what is your focus market? Where do you need to go to? And how then we help you take you through? It's not always about giving money. It's the value adds that are far greater than any monetary value to those innovative businesses that we see. Help them to find where the passion lies, help them to find out where the target market lies, help them to find out which corporate then relates to that particular thing. Be the heart of that business, and that's where you go.
Okay. Next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Palisa Ntakata. I'm from Lesotho. My question is, or my concern, it's about ladies in this house. In most boarding schools, whenever a teacher has a negative impact on their cell phones, we as women, we as guardians, we are the first one to say, let those kids not use a cell phone. And it's one of the easiest, affordable way of using the technology. I just wonder if that is going to happen in our African countries, because we have a very negative mindset when it comes to technology as the guardians. Once we change that, I want to believe that the technology at high school levels, at primary level, can accommodate whatever we want to achieve. Let me go to the cooperative world. The cooperative world, their mandate is to have money, child money, and go. They don't care about the innovation at high school level, at primary level, because those are our entry people capture. So if all the networks, all the cooperative world can make sure that to at least donate the cell phones, at least donate the data, then I think it will help even at the rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that will lead, I guess the question there would be, many people may not have a computer, but a lot of people have a cell phone, you know, for example. So how do we, you know, within schools and high schools, like she was saying, how do we ensure that they understand that this is also a way, it's not just something about being social, it is a way of almost teaching children, you know, about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, if anybody would like to respond.
Sure. Okay. The Telkom Foundation head is somewhere in the room, waving. She has been instrumental to ensuring that such gadgets are accessible in township and rural areas in South Africa. And over and beyond Telkom just taking computers and saying, here you go, have fun, see you next time. They're ensuring that programs are being, you know, given to the learners on weekends, after school, where coding and just introduction to the Fourth Industrial Revolution is not just information and decide what you do with it. They're ensuring that the learners understand that extramural activities are no longer just about sports and soccer and you know, they now taking such programs as the extramural activity. So there is work being done. I know Vodacom and others are also doing that. What we need to do is challenge them more. Let's send more emails. Let's send more requests to such organizations. Microsoft is right here. I'm imagining there might be a long queue
yes.
outside.
Ronel, I need Ronel to, Ronel is my teacher engagement executive at Microsoft to talk about what we're doing in education. And I think you can do a 5-minute advert for all of you to jump on some of the things that we're doing at school level, because Microsoft is very passionate about education. We've literally made our software available for free. We have a program called mahala.ms where every child in South Africa can have access to Microsoft Office for free. That is an 11 billion rand investment. The problem we have is that the news does not spread fast enough. So, Ronel, if you maybe just want to do 2 seconds of some of the specific programs that Microsoft is running in some of our schools, just to talk about, you know, what are we doing to impact education in the country.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Lillian was saying, there's lots of programs, specifically that I head up, and one of that is teacher professional development. So what we do is we go out to schools in South Africa and we upskill teachers on how to incorporate pedagogy and technology to enhance learning outcomes. Now, I have a teaching background for 19 years, and I believe that any technology that you infuse into the learning environment has to enhance learning outcomes. If you're just substituting tech with paper, then you're not doing the learners any good. So that's one of the programs that we do. We also have programs like Skype in the Classroom, for example, where a teacher who's a specialist in a specific subject like maths and science, we know we have a shortage of teachers with those skills in South Africa as well. So they can teach via Skype and reach a lot more learners as well. So those are the types of programs that we have at Microsoft.
Thank you very much, Ronel.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment on the analysis I've done of education. I mean, in education or basic and secondary education, there's basically 4 constituencies. There's the learner, the administrator, the educator, and the parent. It seems as though the learner is the most techno-enthusiastic. Learners just want it, they gobble it up. Administrators are relatively keen and they want to try and find ways to make it happen. Educators and parents together are equally technophobic.
Yes, true.
And as parents, I think we need to start encouraging, you know, if our kid's doing something on a tablet, that's also real learning.
Absolutely.
And we should be agents for change in the educational environment.
Thank you very much. A question, sorry, I couldn't see you pass the speaker on the left-hand side.
Thank you very much. My name is Koziba from Botswana. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I host a radio show. My question is, given the current situation that we have right now as a continent, having high rates of unemployment, clearly that we have more supply of graduates as compared to the demand. The question that I have is that, is it not time for us now to move our educational system into the fourth revolutionary industry? And then also, what are we doing to bring in our policy developers and policy implementers, especially the politicians, given the fact that right now in Africa, we have less young people that are actively involved in politics, but we have more elders involved in politics. Yet again, we are talking fourth revolutionary industry. What is it that we need to do in order for us to be involved as Africa? Thank you very much.
So I'm going to take the second question because I believe we answered the question with regards to education earlier. So I guess, almost to paraphrase, I hope I get it correct, how do we ensure that in terms of government and policymakers and politicians and so forth, that we ensure that young people are being included in the fourth industrial revolution and women as well, you know, those kind of policies and politics around it. I believe that's what she was trying to say. How do we ensure that that happens? Because that is a huge thing around the continent. One thing we deal with a lot is policy, politics, red tape. You can't get around, you know, bureaucrats and everything, so bureaucracy, sorry, and all of that. So how do we find a way of getting around that, and how do we ensure that our politicians and leaders understand the importance of it?
The President has established the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, and I believe there's an opportunity for us in industry to play a role, to bring our views, and also to talk about the difference that we can make. When she talks about the unemployed graduates, and I think when we talk about unemployment in our country, that's sitting at 27%. If you just look at young people, that's 35%, and that's quite staggering. So it's real. We will not be able to absorb all of our young people into the job market, and that is why we have to make sure that we teach a little bit more about entrepreneurship. We make entrepreneurship more attractive, because also the real opportunities will really lie in entrepreneurship. Just to quickly talk about the study that I talked about, with all of the investments that are coming to South Africa based on Fourth Industrial Revolution skills, we believe that there's an opportunity to drive an additional 80 billion in terms of economic growth. And the question is, who's going to do that? We need to make sure that we position our people so that they are able to participate.
Okay. No comments from... Can we have the next question? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon to all in the house. My name is Meme Khosinyane from South Africa, coming from the Northern Cape. I have been listening to you carefully, and I hear one of you talking about we must focus on our business more than focusing on jobs. And then again, I hear you saying we must have a behavior change to overcome fear. I would like to say we want to go into business, but we do have fear. The reason being, you will see a man or a woman starting the business, and the business will flow and flow, but all of a sudden, you'll see the business falling apart. Now I'm asking myself, what has gone wrong? Does he short some skills or what? Especially in our township. If you can only answer me on that one, in order for us to overcome our fear. Thank you.
Ms. Khaul, I think that's addressed to you.
So I'll take that question. So research has shown that most businesses fail in the first 2 years, not because it was a bad business. It's because there was a lack of management in business. So if we say that is our biggest fear, that we lack business acumen, then what then we need to do? We absolutely need to upskill. And we need to make sure we do this not only when we start the business. That should be in the schools. It should be a part of the curriculum, you know, where we start practically, not academically, just from a theory point of view. You want to practically teach young women and young men how to become entrepreneurs. We find there's far too much theory, far less practical aspects in how you manage and run your business. So by the time you start your business, which is fantastic, you lack the management skill. So I say that if you need to know how to keep your business above where it needs to be, make sure you are upskilled on your management skills. What do I mean? Financial management, technical management, behavioral management, people management, all of these aspects, compliance, all of these aspects which are very, very important in making sure your business is consistent and sustainable.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Busale Dwaba from the Northwest in South Africa. I am very much worried here. I come from an area whereby we haven't passed the second industrial revolution, where there's no connectivity. And then we are here discussing all these good things. I would like to go back and implement some of the decisions that are taken here to go and inform other people, to give them information. But I'm still at that stage where I'm still in the second industrial revolution. How am I going to get help?
So how do we catch up? Because it's been articulated in her question, and also Professor at the beginning did say that a lot of us, you know, within Africa, we've not even gone through the first, second, or third industrial revolution. How do we catch up at this time in history?
So one of the things that, we run an organization called New Innovation, and it's a non-profit company, and what we do is we bring together let's say the haves and the have-nots, because we sit with private sector, we sit with government, come up with solutions for such areas to say, how do we collaborate with the community to ensure that the needs are met? So if she would like, we can meet after and talk about, through the partnerships that we currently have, how can we get the help that they need to get them to the fourth, and maybe even prepare them for the fifth, so that the fifth industrial revolution is owned by Africans.
Okay. Yes, good afternoon all. And my name's Sylvia Chidonka from Namibia. I'm an advocate for persons with disabilities as a parent of a child with disabilities. And I just want to say thank you to the panelists for their presentations. Yes, as we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, with the heading that it is inclusiveness. We are talking about inclusiveness. In all the presentations, it was really straightforward that we talk about technology, digital devices, we talk about all those driving technologies which are there. Are all these inclusive for persons with disabilities? Is this technology and devices, are they inclusive for persons with disabilities? Because we are getting all those worries from our persons that they want to do all those innovations, they want to do what, but those devices, they are not accessible for them. And also, from my side, also as a parent, you know, okay, I've innovated one of the centers for children's disabilities, which I'm leading. But, you know, with the mothers I'm working with, as a mother myself, you know, we want to forge ahead with our technology, with our education, but, you know, with the African background, we did not have those opportunities which others did have. But in that line, there's Madam Lillian said that we need to expose ourselves to the new free devices or tools. How can we get those? You know, our people, they might have those information, but the people ground there, they do not receive those information. And also from the previous who speaks about the programs in the Microsoft, are these programs also accessible for our persons with disabilities, which are happening here in South Africa? Are they also getting those programs, our persons with disabilities? I think that's my question.
Okay, so I'm going to thank you very much for your question. I'm going to summarize this very quickly, and if you feel that you can make the strong point, you can answer. So the question, I suppose the one question is about you know, the inclusion of people with disabilities? How are we seeing that work tangibly in an African context? That's the one question. And then the other question that keeps coming back is access. If you're not in a room like this or in a city like this and you're far away, how do you get this access? How do we ensure that you get the access? Yes, Professor.
I mean, I think technology can potentially increase inclusion and empowerment for people with disabilities. If we think, for example, I'm just making an example of one person, Professor Stephen Hawking, the famous British scientist who did groundbreaking research about the nature of the universe and so on. By the time he died, he was suffering from a debilitating degenerative illness. He couldn't move, he couldn't talk, he couldn't do anything. You could say he couldn't do anything, but he could. He was writing books. He was lecturing around the world. He was doing research that nobody else could do about where the universe came from and so on. Through technology. He had special computers that were enabling him to translate his thoughts into books and so on. That's at a high level. But even if we look at other levels, there's technology now that is very empowering for people who, without sight or without hearing and so on. It's really around access to that technology. And I think that really relates to the second question about access to technology more broadly. The technological capabilities are there. It's about the economic access. But technology can potentially be either empowering and inclusionary or disempowering and exclusionary. If you think about smartphones, even someone in a rural area who has a smartphone and who has access to a network and has data for that, they can access a world of information just through that tiny gadget, more than any library in the world. So technology has that potential, but it's about access to that technology and having that technology appropriately adapted.
Making sure that it gets to the right people.
Can I answer just on that, if you don't mind? Yes. So I just really want to latch into that point. And at Microsoft, we talk about AI for accessibility. So we have literally built accessibility tools in all our software. And we have a particular app where we talk about seeing AI, particularly, of course, targeted at blind people. And also in terms of some of the work that we do in schools, when you think of kids who are dyslexia, who typically would get left behind, we're making sure that we've also built software tools to make sure that we also personalize learning. So accessibility is a big topic for us at Microsoft. This is all about making sure you drive inclusivity. All of those tools are available. But I guess on a broader scale is how do you close the digital divide to make sure it's even available for people who are remote.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
My name is Barbara Banda from Malawi. I work in the women economic empowerment space, and my question is regards digital currencies. We are getting a lot of information, particularly from the social media, about bitcoins, cryptocurrencies, and yet there is no official communication from the authorities, from the banks, as to how we are going to deal with this new, I'm sure, fourth industrial revolution currency. And women are in the majority in micro and small businesses. How are they going to be affected by this high level of technology? Thank you.
Cryptocurrency, the good, the bad, and the other. Does anybody want to try and address that?
So I know, for example, our South African Reserve Bank is definitely looking at cryptocurrencies, looking at the possibility of central bank issued cryptocurrencies to find out what works, what doesn't work, and so on. I think really the issue around small business and making business frictionless for small and micro enterprises is a very interesting point. Whether, at the moment, cash is more frictionless than cryptocurrencies at the moment. I think the world will move on, that cryptocurrencies will provide a very interesting frictionless alternative. I think we'll get more regulation around them because, of course, we don't want economies that the government doesn't have fingers in.
And you see Nedbank on the side there.
So I do think that will come. I think what we need to be careful of, though, is, again, that we don't end up with a Google of cryptocurrencies. that there is a global leader that's not based here, that is maybe based in Shanghai or Silicon Valley or wherever, and that ends up being the cryptocurrency of common use. So that will be and who controls that? We do. We decide whether we use Google or Bing or whatever. So I'd say that's something that everybody can take away and say, let's just watch the space. It's not yet mature enough for small businesses to use on a regular basis, but watch the space. And when you do choose to get involved, recognize you are creating a new global leader.
Okay, so my thought on that would be, Africa should have its currency. Why do we wait for it to come from the UK, from China? Yeah. Let's have an African currency and let's trade with one another in African currency, so we're not left out waiting for someone else to rate us in South Africa or in Africa for that matter. You know, and I mean, we are so innovative. We've got so many ways of doing things. Think about from the time where we did bartering. Yeah, we were bartering when we started off. We didn't have currency. Then we came up with currency, and we caught on to it very fast because we had to. So if we are in this fourth industrial revolution, what is stopping us from creating an African currency and making it and owning it? So that would be my thought of that.
Thank you. If we can have a question, I'm going to take one, and then we'll answer, just so we can ensure we get everybody. Ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Balasela Bona, and I'm from South Africa. Thank you for the insights and knowledge regarding the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and thank you for the inclusivity of a millennial on a panel. One of the major themes has been intergenerational relationships. Although there are various social gaps within relationships from generation to generation, there are also tech gaps. One with the youth and the BBTs, i.e. the born before technology, i.e. the older generation. I understand that there is a focus on empowering the younger generation, but what about the older generation who run the households, are in positions to create a positive culture around technology? What are we doing to reach, engage with the BBTs and ensure that they aren't left behind, are part of the conversation and advance technology in the whole?
Thank you very much. We'll get somebody in the panel to answer. I've noted your question. Good afternoon, ma'am. If she could please lead her to the mic. Yes, you can turn the mic.
Habari ya mchana, ndugu washiriki. Kwa jina naitwa Doris Kulanga, nimetokea Tanzania. Mimi ni mwanamke, nina changamoto ya uoni. Ni mwenyekiti wa jumuiya ya wanawake na watoto Shivyawata, lakini pia ni mwalimu wa shule ya msingi. Ninaweza kufundisha pamoja na changamoto nilionayo. Kwanza kabisa napenda kuwashukuru wawezeshaji wote kwa mada nzuri ambazo mmetupa uelewa. Naamini wanawake wa Afrika tukijiandaa kisaikolojia, mabadiliko au mapinduzi ya 4 ya viwanda yanaweza kutusogeza mbele zaidi. Lakini swali langu kwa wawezeshaji, mapinduzi ya kwanza, ya pili na ya tatu, kama watu wenye ulemavu, hususan wanawake, tuliachwa nyuma, kwamba tulikuwa bado ni tegemezi kilinganisha na wenzetu wasio na ulemavu. Sasa na kwenda moja kwa moja kwenye swali, je, tunajiandaaje au nini wataalamu mnajiandaaje kupokea haya mabadiliko ya viwanda ya 4, kutengeneza mazingira ili sisi watu wenye ulemavu tusiachwe nyuma kama tulivyoachwa nyuma kwenye mapinduzi ya kwanza, ya pili na ya tatu. Natamani niende kanisani, labda niende msikitini, niende kutembea, kujifunza masuala mbalimbali peke yangu, nikiwa peke yangu, labda nikitumia usafiri, mfano gari au bajaji kama ninyi mnavyofanya. Sasa naamini hiyo robot au mapinduzi ya 4 ya viwanda tukiyapokea vizuri na nyie mkiyatengeneza vizuri, basi hata mimi naweza nikaendesha gari kwa kutumia hiyo robot, au nikasema wewe robot nipeleke labda kanisani au msikitini au kazini. Asante.
Okay, thank you so much. So we will address So sorry. So we'll address the first question around intergenerational relationships, if one person could volunteer a powerful response. And then to the second question, just around the fact, from the just around the fact of people getting left behind. So which one would you like to address?
On the intergenerational one,
okay.
As the old guy in the room. So I think it's a really important question, and what is important for me is the inter in that question. That it isn't about either millennials or the old guys. It's about how do we work together and what can we learn from each other. You might remember that picture I showed of the 10 white guys on the thing. What's interesting about them is 8 out of 10 of those are older than 50. So there is stuff that we can learn from the old guys, but we need the creativity and the energy and the tech savviness and the affinity with tech of youngsters, and it's about how we put it together and bring the best out of both.
Guaco, you wanted to address the...
So the second question was centered around inclusivity for people living with disabilities, and her sole point was that we've left them behind in the first, second, and third industrial revolution. And mine is in 1956, when the women marched to union buildings. I think they moved from a point of the men have left us behind in fighting for this freedom to let us take the call and go fight it ourselves because we know our needs as women. So my point is, one, there's a lot of educational institutions that are available, higher universities and higher education tertiaries universities, that are testing some of the innovations that assist to people with disabilities. At Wits in Braamfontein, we've got a guy with no hands who's busy developing a piano that plays from just him thinking about the notes. So it's taking the call to say, how do we, people living with disabilities, make it a point that our voice is heard? So her coming to the front and raising this is good. Secondly, how do we take action? Because it affects us the most. It does not affect those who are not living with a disability, so they don't think about it as much, which is wrong, but it's important that those who are affected take the first step to say, I too want an innovation and a solution that will make my life as easy as yours may be.
And I think just before we go to another question from the panel, as you were speaking, I just realized that when it comes to people with disabilities and so forth, the fourth industrial revolution can really help bridge the gap and ensure that they're totally included. But we need to make sure that it's something that is actively done, and governments need to actively focus on that. Good afternoon, ma'am. Your question, please. Oh, please put on your headphones, panelists.
Thank you. I'm Beatrice Makaya Samba from Democratic Republic of Congo, Kinshasa. I'm a lecturer at the training college in Kinshasa, ISP Gombe. As a French speaker, I'm gonna speak in French, my official language.
Yes, go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. Merci d'abord pour les organisateurs de ce forum, parce qu'aujourd'hui, nous venons de suivre des matières très difficiles, mais expliquées facilement, surtout par le recteur de l'Université de Johannesburg. Merci beaucoup. Je remercie également les intervenantes et les intervenants qui sont là du panel, parce qu'ils viennent de nous démontrer les avancées en République sud-africaine par rapport au monde rural et aux écoles, enseignants et élèves. C'est bien cela, mais je vous ramène à la réalité de mon pays. Par rapport à la révolution, à la 4e révolution industrielle, il y a des grands défis en République démocratique du Congo. Le défi d'abord entre le monde rural et la capitale. Tout ce que nous venons de dire ici, c'est déjà applicable dans la ville de Kinshasa et les grandes villes chefs-lieux de province. Qu'en est-il du monde rural, où ils n'ont même pas encore l'énergie, le courant électrique, où la pauvreté bat son plein? C'est un rêve. Deuxièmement, 2 intervenants ont planché sur les politiques de réforme des programmes scolaires. Dans mon pays, j'enseigne dans une école de formation des maîtres il y a déjà un décalage entre les connaissances des étudiants et le retard de l'enseignant. L'étudiant est déjà en avance par rapport à son professeur, parce que lui, il manipule très bien tout ce qui est outils informatiques, mais les programmes de recyclage des enseignants, des professeurs, ne suivent pas. C'est ainsi que j'ai trouvé très intéressant l'expérience de Télécom et Microsoft sud-africaine qui va dans les écoles pour la mise à niveau. Ma question est celle-ci. Quelle stratégie mettre en place pour que AWID puisse nous aider, nous, en RDC, à pouvoir remettre à niveau, recycler rapidement les enseignants, surtout les enseignantes, sélectionner les plus de femmes pour que celles-là deviennent les formatrices des formateurs demain afin de s'accaparer, de s'approprier la révolution, la 4e révolution industrielle. Je termine par une recommandation, si le panel me le permet. Ma recommandation est celle-ci. Dans les emails que AWID nous avait envoyés depuis nos pays, on nous demande de nous inscrire dans la plateforme. Combien sommes-nous ici qui nous sommes déjà inscrites? C'est ça ma recommandation. Inscrivons-nous le plus grand nombre possible pour que cette plateforme soit très dynamique et très inclusive, surtout que ce forum est un forum des femmes. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question, Mercy. I think it was very powerful, a lot of what she asked, but I know that nobody hears from government, nobody hears from the government in the DRC, so it is very hard to answer, but I think the question that she was saying, it comes down to the whole issue when it comes to policies that are put in place at a government level in different countries, how we ensure that not just people who are in the capital city like Kinshasa, which has been what we've been discussing in comparison to South Africa, but people on the outside, outside of capital cities are able to access information and they don't get left behind. I don't know if anybody can accurately make a comment towards this. I just don't want to put you in a situation if you're not able to, because we are speaking about another country with a different policy and so forth. So, but if you want to answer, then please, Brian.
I think what I'm about to say, I think, is fairly universal, not specific to any countries. Fiona made the point that the fourth industrial revolution isn't something that we pursue in isolation. Economic development, in the good old traditional sense, is still really, really important. And there have been a number of studies, and quite recently, and that does mean that the basics of good practice with regard to economic development, sound governance, good macroeconomic basics, are an important thing that go hand in hand with it. The fourth industrial revolution will happen, but it's not a magic wand that will sort of just wave away all the historical inequality, historical reality, and to get out of that requires sustained, sound economic development.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
And I'm not going to pretend for 1 second that I have an eloquent answer, but I think maybe just to address in terms of what are we doing outside of South Africa, we have an organization called Microsoft for Africa, where you can literally go and look at all the initiatives that we're driving into the rest of Africa, and they may just give you a hint as to how you potentially could partner with Microsoft outside of South Africa, even though I know I do have a remit just for South Africa. But I think that comment for me is equally relevant whether you talk about DRC or whether you talk about the most remote town in this country. And I think we have to continuously apply our mind as to what are we going to do to urgently address the digital divide.
Definitely. I think we do have to close right now. Do I have the lady, do I have time for one more question? Yes, no? Okay, one more question, please, ma'am. Oh, please put on your headphones.
Bom dia, eu chamo-me... Okay. Bom dia, boa tarde, chamo-me Ana Maria Calombe, venho de Angola. Estou aqui a representar a plataforma Mulheres em Ação. É uma organização que vela pelos direitos da igualdade de gênero e defende os direitos humanos da mulher. Abordando sobre o tema aqui, a tecnologia, Eu venho dizer que, vendo a realidade de Angola, nós ainda estamos muito longe da quarta revolução industrial, porque, principalmente as mulheres, porque a maior parte da população em Angola são mulheres, e 70% destas mulheres trabalham no mercado informal. E vendo esta situação, a maior parte dos produtos que nós utilizamos em Angola são importados. Como podemos, que mecanismo, vendo a experiência dos outros países, que mecanismos e estratégias nós podemos utilizar para que Angola possa chegar até a quarta revolução industrial? A outra questão, no que toca, eu vi a doutora só não gravei bem o nome, que falou que na África do Sul as empresas privadas são responsabilizadas para o desenvolvimento das comunidades em questão. Nós em Angola, da qual eu sou coordenadora de um projeto que é a participação comunitária e responsabilidade social das empresas. Lá em Angola, as nossas políticas não ajudam, nós não temos uma lei que obrigue essas empresas a colaborarem para o desenvolvimento da comunidade. Dentro desse projeto, nós estamos a encontrar muita dificuldade para que essas empresas possam colaborar no desenvolvimento da comunidade. Como nós vamos fazer para que aquelas mulheres que estão naquela comunidade possam fazer parte da nova tecnologia? Obrigada.
Sure, obrigado. So again, it comes to, if anybody wants to be able to address that, because Brian is like, no.
I think, yes, and I mean, I will not be able to address that question eloquently, and I think if you think about typically what happened in most companies, it comes to public-private partnerships. It's the only way that you start addressing some of these things at a country level, and it becomes very hard to particularly address, the challenge that she articulated in Angola. But we have to partner as private sector with government to make sure that we actually make a difference.
Definitely.
And this is when we say, women in Africa must arise and make your voice known.
Yes.
And if you believe that the policies of the government are not working, what are we doing about it?
To be heard.
And I believe that we don't do enough. We wait. Yes. Why are we waiting when we ourselves can take the action of doing something about it?
I just want to take this time to thank all of the panelists for being part of this conversation about I'm so sorry, I'm being queued for time, ladies, just about the inclusivity of women in the fourth industrial revolution. I think one of the most powerful things that we can take from this, because there are a lot of things that we cannot answer, on the panel that we can't answer, there are things that we can't fix. Mr. Armstrong mentioned about how it's not a magic wand, but I think what was reiterated over and over and over again is that, and when you think about the whole idea that we're always waiting for somebody else to do something for us in government, and when we sit in a continent where we've been waiting for so long, one of the things are if you engage, if you try and educate yourself, if you use your mobile phone, you can empower yourself and take yourself into the fourth industrial revolution a lot more, and there are those processes available. I'm going to say if you want to speak to any of the panelists after this, they will be available. But thank you very much for your insight, for your knowledge, and congratulations on all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go to lunch, I believe that the organizers would like to say a thing or two with regards to reflections on the conference so far. Linda and the lady, if you're available, possibly.
Can I take my water? Oh. Thank you. Thank you.
I hope that you're feeling inspired. Yes? And you're hungry too, right? Yeah. No. I believe there is just a freehand mic you can use. Yes.
Is that on?
Let me help you. One, two, yes.
Thank you so much to Lee. Can we give her a round of applause?
Thank you.
You held it so well for us. Before we can make announcements, I'm going to give some 2 minutes to the University of Johannesburg to entice us to come visit their stand just outside the hall and tell us what experience we'll get. Immediately after them, there will be somebody from Cisco to do the same thing for 2 minutes, and then we look at our announcements for how the day is going to run. Thank you. I'm handing you over to another Linda from the University of Johannesburg.
Thank you, Sise. Good morning, everyone. It's fascinating how technology has changed our lives in many ways. My mother, who's 78 years old, has managed to connect with us. I called her through a video call, and so as far as she is in Cape Town, she was able to be part of this important engagement. But as much as we're so addicted to some technologies, I think all of us have experienced some challenges and frustrations with some of the technologies. Professor Marwala earlier on in spoke about how our Google Maps can't pronounce some of the street names, and it has caused great discomfort to many of us. But, and again, that's the result of adapting technology that has been developed by other people for our context. So I would like, while you're having lunch, or before or after you having lunch, please pop in at our stand at the University of Johannesburg stand. Is right outside that door on your left-hand side. There we are showcasing some of the technologies that have been developed by our faculty members, by our students, for our context. And some of the technologies, if you go there, that you will see, we've got 3D printing technologies, 2 of them, 2 different ones. The first one is a 3D concrete printer, and that is used in the built environment space. And this printer can be used to build and design RDP houses in 1 day. The other 3D technology that we have in our stand is a printer that uses plastic media. And we use this to build prototypes and models. So when a company is building a city, they use that technology to develop a prototype or a model to optimize the concept before building the actual thing. So go to our stand and get to find out more about these fantastic technologies. We also have a project that is developed by our 3rd-year students. They've developed an online store for some of the business women in Soweto who don't have a platform to market their products. And this platform online store is competing with the likes of Amazon. But what's nice also, these students have also developed a mobile app. So for those women that are in the rural areas, there is a mobile app that they can use to market their product in a broad space. And lastly, we also have showcasing a robot that is built by the high school students. They've built it themselves, they've programmed it themselves, and this is part of our outreach project at the University of Johannesburg in developing the next generation of kind of people that the future place of work requires today. So we do welcome all of you, and we're looking forward to hosting you in our stall. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good morning, ladies. Oh, good afternoon, ladies. Watinda abafazi. My name is Soso. How many of us like shopping online? Okay. How many of us would actually like to see or like to feel, have the touch and feel of the clothes while shopping online? Yes, I think for one of the barriers of people not or people shopping online is that there is no touch and feel, and you can't really zoom in sometimes into the product. As Cisco, we are showing what we call virtual reality in one of our room, one of the rooms here. It's called Cape Town room. When you get out of here, it's on your left hand side. So above all of that, we are also showcasing the kind of skills that people need in order for them to be included in the fourth industrial revolutions. So these skills can be offered through universities, NGO, and people can actually get these skills at their own comfort or at home, wherever they are, so they can actually get them via self-paced courses. So I'm here to actually exhibit what we call a Cisco Networking Academy, which is a newer way of learning the skills that we need in this day and age. Thank you very much.
There we have it. This is the middle of day 3 of 5 days. Can you believe it? We're making it slow and amazingly with good quality progress and all our engagements. I'm just going to take you through how we're going to work after lunch so that we all know where we're going, what to do, who to look out for. According to our program, which I hope you are using, because the back of that program has amazing articles. There's a piece by Professor Marwala on what is the fourth industrial revolution. If you read that, you can get home and be the expert to whoever asks you, where have you been? Professor Catherine Odora Hoppers gave us a beautiful piece on values. Remember her yesterday? So there's a lot. Please use that program. We will be moving into commissions after lunch. And since yesterday, most of you have been registering for commissions. The registration desk is still open. So please continue to register, be in a commission. Some of the things discussed this morning, you want to take them forth and give your own views and opinion. There on the screen, we've got the 9 commissions. There's 2 that are bolded. Commission 7 and Commission 8, they are full. Hardy, if you were still thinking of going to those. But we still have rooms in the rest of the other commissions. So please register. The volunteers are at their desk. Make sure you put your name down and have a decent seat in one of them. We're about to break for lunch. The blue letters are the names of the venues where those commissions are sitting. Education, it's in the auditorium, which is at the International Center. Most of you now know where the International Center is. That's where the medical clinic is. Agriculture is at Silverleaf, and the rest goes. All of the commission venues except education are on the other side of the Birchwood reception. So they're located that side. So you don't have to look for anything this side. However, we go for lunch. The commissions kick off at 2. We still have time. I'm going to ask that at 10 to 2, we all by then should have left the lunch rooms, which are both this side, and you walk towards the lawns. The volunteers will be there lifting names of commissions for you to see. So if you registered for youth, there will be a signage saying youth. Go to that sign, somebody will take you to that room. The signage will stay so that we keep coming and we take into the rooms, and the latest by 2:15, the commissions would be able to start. Can we work together on that? Remember the chaos with the 42 groups the other day? At least now we're dealing with 9. It's going to look like fun, but it's more manageable. There'll be 9 signages. Go to your sign. They'll take you to the room, and you've got the next 3 hours to unpack the issues and give us guidelines on where we should go. If that is clear with commissions, I'm going to move to the last point. Are we okay with commissions? Thank you so much. Unfortunately, as an organizer, it ended up on my shoulders to try and appeal to your cooperation as our wonderful delegates. We've got 1,039 people registered present at the conference. So sometimes it's not easy. We've talked about a lot of stuff. Yesterday, we defined beautiful values that we want to see ourselves following. Unfortunately, as it goes, some of us go against the grain. So there's a few of us who are not playing ball. And I want to appeal to you as my leaders. Thank you so much. So let's be self-directed ourselves and not do that. That's the punctuality issue. I'm really sorry, but I have to raise these 3 issues. So I've dealt with punctuality. The second one is shopping. We have planned amazing excursions for tomorrow, precisely because we don't want you to travel, spend your whole week at Birchwood, and that's all you've seen of Johannesburg. There's even 3 buses that are taking people to the Gate Mall for shopping. Please, can we spend the time we have here, rather than harassing the volunteers to tell us where's the Oriental Plaza, where's the inner city, where do I get a taxi, I must go to Maboneng, and all those kind of things. Let me tell you part of why that is not so good. The minute you step out of this place, you are on your own. Whatever happens, we won't even know. And you are not even covered. So you can't come to me and say, I was mugged, my leg was broken. I don't have insurance for you at the Oriental Plaza. But you are covered here at this venue. When you get on the bus, you are covered. When you get on the plane, you are covered. But if you veer outside what we have provided, you are on your own. White African woman, we can't help you, and we don't want that. So please work with us. Let's use this time for tomorrow. Have fun. We good, no? Excellent. The last one, but one. There's ladies who are selling merchandise. Yesterday it was beautiful. There were beautiful dresses we were buying. 1 or 2 people took the dresses and walked away. I'm leaving it at that. You can just see it's not worth dealing with it. So if you did that, just take it back. Thank you. The last, we reserved just over 900 to be accommodated, especially those traveling from afar. The rooms are to be shared. This is a funded conference, so it's not easy, but it's been made easy. We celebrated Mambeki on day 1, who made this possible. This is what we have done. When you get a key and you know you are sharing, take your key, you get to your room, you call 3 friends, they come and join you. I had a delegate arriving at late. We give them a key, they get to the room, people are fully sleeping in the room. We're forced to buy more rooms for people nowhere else to sleep because we've called our friends. The West is a room that has 5 people. They are not our delegates. You call them, now they've got text, they are here. Yes, they may benefit, but you've displaced somebody, self-displaced somebody. I really don't like doing this. This is the last.
Samayalo ipatla na sabo dilo, tuwa